Willa Thorne, a devoted grandmother, faces a shocking betrayal when her daughter Allison and son-in-law Derek relegate her to their cold, moldy garage after 12 years of sacrifices, raising their daughter Liv, managing their household, and even contributing $75,000 to their home. Feeling discarded, Willa, a retired teacher who poured her life into her family, consults attorney Linda Chen to reclaim her dignity. As tensions rise and Liv questions the unfairness, Willa's resolve strengthens. Will she win back her place in the family or uncover a deeper truth about her worth? The confrontation looms, promising dramatic revelations. If Willa's story of courage and transformation moved you, please support our channel. Subscribe now to join our community and unlock more heartfelt tales. Hit that like button, share with friends, and stay tuned. Tomorrow we've got an extra special story waiting just for you. Your support means everything. The garage door creaked shut behind Derek, leaving me standing in the dim, flickering light of a single fluorescent bulb. My suitcase, small and worn from years of modest use, weighed heavily in my hand. I surveyed the space, hardly a room, more a corner carved out among stacks of paint cans, rusty gardening tools, and boxes labeled with memories I'd helped create. A fold-out cot sagged in the corner, its thin mattress dressed with a single pillow and a faded blanket that looked like an afterthought. This was my new home, at 65, after 12 years of pouring my heart into raising my granddaughter, Olivia, and keeping my daughter's household afloat. Derek had gestured around the space with the enthusiasm of a real estate agent showcasing a penthouse, but his eyes never met mine. "It's just temporary," he'd said, his voice clipped as he backed toward the door, already eager to escape. "Until we figure things out." Through the small, grimy window, I watched him jog back to the main house, my daughter Allison's beautiful home, the one I'd helped them afford with my life savings. The same home where I'd nursed Liv through fevers, spent countless evenings puzzling over math homework, and kept the chaos at bay while Allison and Derek chased their ambitions. Now I was relegated to this cold, concrete space, a discarded piece of their carefully curated life. My name is Wilhelmina Thorne, though everyone calls me Willa. For 40 years, I taught 5th grade at Oak Ridge Elementary, shaping young minds with patience and unwavering belief in their potential. Teaching wasn't just a pibois job, it was my purpose, my way of leaving the world a little brighter. I carried that same devotion into my family, especially with my only daughter, Allison. When she married Derek Thompson, I had my doubts. His charm was polished, his ambition undeniable, but his definition of success seemed to hinge on wealth and status, not the quiet, steady work of building a life together. Still, Allison glowed with love, so I kept my reservations locked away, offering support instead of skepticism. When Olivia, my Liv, came into the world, my heart expanded in ways I hadn't known were possible. Being her grandmother was a joy I embraced fully, a gift that filled the quiet spaces of my early retirement. Everything changed the day Allison called me, her voice breaking over the phone. She'd landed her dream job at a prestigious real estate firm, but childcare costs would devour her salary. Derek was buried in his corporate climb, working 60-hour weeks, and they were barely keeping their heads above water. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I've worked so hard for this." My response was immediate, instinctive. "I'll help. I'll be there." Within a month, I'd rented out my modest home in Cherry Creek and moved into their guest bedroom in Lakeside Heights. It felt like the perfect arrangement. I'd care for Liv and manage the household while they built their careers, and they'd provide me a place to stay in my retirement years. No one mentioned timelines or end dates. I assumed we were building something lasting, a family woven together by shared effort and love. For 12 years, I gave everything to that household. I packed Liv's lunches with care, slipping in notes to make her smile. I drove her to soccer practices, cheering from the sidelines, and sat through piano recitals, clapping louder than anyone. I learned to cook Derek's favorite meals, steak with garlic mashed potatoes, lasagna with extra cheese, keeping the house running like a well-oiled machine. Allison and Derek thrived, their careers soaring. They renovated their home, adding a sleek kitchen and a sprawling deck, and took lavish vacations to places like Aspen and the Bahamas, sometimes leaving Liv with me for weeks. I never minded. I wasn't chasing gratitude. I did it out of love. believing family meant standing shoulder to shoulder, sharing both the burdens and the joys. I thought we were creating a legacy together, a home where love and sacrifice were the foundation. The day it all unraveled began like any other. I was in the kitchen, preparing lasagna for our Friday family dinner, the rich scent of tomato sauce filling the air. Liv, now 10 and blossoming into her own person, was beside me, chopping cucumbers for the salad. We were laughing about a silly incident at school, something about a science project gone awry, when Allison and Derek came home earlier than usual. Their faces were tight, their smiles forced, and a knot formed in my stomach. "Mom, Shuash," Allison said after dinner, her voice unnaturally formal. "We need to talk." Liv, sensing the shift in the air, grew quiet, her usual chatter fading as she excused herself to finish her homework upstairs. Derek cleared his throat, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Willa, Allison and I have been discussing our living situation." Allison jumped in, her words rushed. "Mom, you've been incredible with Liv all these years, and we're so grateful. But she's getting more independent now, and we think it's time for us to have our space back as a nuclear family." The words landed like a blow, sharp and disorienting. My fork hovered over my plate, the lasagna now cold and unappetizing. "Oh," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. Derek chimed in, his tone smooth, practiced, like he was closing a business deal. "It's not that we don't appreciate everything you've done. It's just that Liv needs to develop her independence. And frankly, the dynamic in the house feels unbalanced sometimes." Unbalanced, the word echoed in my mind, cutting deeper each time. I had given up my home, my financial security, my independence to support them. I'd poured $75,000 from my retirement savings into their down payment for this house, money they'd promised to repay but never did. I'd sacrificed rental income from my Cherry Creek property to be here, day in and day out for their family. And now my presence was an imbalance, a disruption to their perfect picture. "When would you like me to leave?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. They exchanged a glance, quick and calculated. "Well, that's the thing," Allison said, twisting her napkin. "The housing market in Cherry Creek has gotten so expensive, and we know your pension doesn't stretch far." Derek leaned in, his voice brimming with false generosity. "We've been thinking about the garage. It's more of a storage area now, but we can clear it out, make it comfortable. You'd still be close to Liv, but we'd all have our own space." The garage. They were offering me the garage, not even a proper room, but a cold, cluttered space where they stored things they didn't want in their pristine home. I was no different to them now, an old tool they weren't ready to throw out but didn't want cluttering their main rooms. "It's temporary," Allison added quickly, her eyes pleading for me to accept this humiliation without protest. "Just until you figure out your next steps." I sat there staring at my untouched plate as 12 years of sacrifice crystallized into this moment. I hadn't been a partner in their life. I'd been a convenience, a live-in nanny whose usefulness had expired. I should have fought back. I should have reminded them of the money, the years, the love I'd poured into their family. I should have demanded respect, or at least an acknowledgement of what I'd given up. Instead, I nodded, excused myself, and walked to the guest room, their guest room, where I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal wasn't just in their words, it was in the ease with which they delivered them, as if moving me to the garage was a logical next step, not a profound act of dismissal. But as the hours ticked by, something hardened inside me. I wouldn't let this break me, and I wouldn't let Liv see her grandmother reduced to a source of conflict. I needed a plan. The next morning, while Allison and Derek slept in, as they always did on Saturdays, I made breakfast for Liv, pancakes with extra chocolate chips, her favorite. As she ate, chattering about a new book she was reading, I slipped into the study and called my younger sister, Barbara. "They did what?" Barb's voice crackled with outrage when I told her about the garage. "After everything you've done, Willa, you need to stand up for yourself." I sighed, the weight of it all pressing down. "I know, Barb. I'm just processing." Her tone softened. "Come stay with me. The farmhouse has plenty of room and I'd love the company." Barb's home in Pine Valley was a haven, a renovated farmhouse surrounded by gardens that fueled her thriving flower shop. But it was 2 hours from Liv, and the thought of that distance felt like a physical ache. Let me think about it, I said. In the meantime, can you recommend a good attorney? I need to understand my options. An attorney? Barb's surprise was palpable. Well, yeah, Linda Chen helped me with the shop's paperwork. She's sharp as a tack. But Willa, what are you planning? I wasn't sure myself, but a quiet resolve was taking root. I just need to know where I stand, Barb. I've given so much. Financially, emotionally, everything. I need to know if I have any rights here. Within a week, I was moved into the garage. Derek had cleared a narrow path through the clutter, setting up the cot, a rickety desk, and a floor lamp that flickered when you touched it. An old area rug partially covered the concrete floor, its edges frayed. The bathroom was a grim affair, its shower clogged with dirt from years of storing gardening tools. There was no kitchen, just a mini fridge and a microwave perched on a plastic bin. See, it's cozy, Derek had said, his smile as hollow as the space itself. Standing there now, alone in the flickering light, I felt the full weight of my new reality. But beneath the hurt and humiliation, a spark of determination flickered. I wouldn't stay here. Not like this. I'd find a way to reclaim my dignity, to rebuild a life that was mine, not as a footnote in someone else's story, but as Wilhelmina Thorne, a woman who had always believed in fighting for what mattered. In the dim light of the garage, I stood in the doorway, the cold concrete floor seeping through my thin slippers, a sharp reminder of my new reality. Allison's voice, tinged with a forced cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes, echoed in my mind. You'll still join us for meals in the main house, of course. Her words felt like a hollow gesture, a bandage on a wound that cut far deeper than she could understand. She shifted uncomfortably, her gaze flickering to the bare walls as she added, We'll make it nicer, Mom. Maybe some curtains. The suggestion hung in the air, a weak attempt to soften the blow of my exile. Beside her, Liv, my granddaughter, stood with wide-eyed, uncertain eyes, her small face clouded with questions she didn't know how to ask. Why is Grandma moving to the garage? She asked, her voice trembling with innocence. Did she do something wrong? Derek, quick to respond before I could gather my thoughts, knelt beside her. No, sweetie, he said, his tone gentle but firm. Grandma just needs her own space now that you're growing up. It's like her own little apartment. His explanation, meant to reassure, landed like a slap. The words twisted a decade of unwavering devotion. Sleepless nights, endless meals, countless moments of love poured into their family. Into a narrative where I was the one who needed distance. The sting was unbearable, like salt rubbed into a raw, open wound. I had given everything to support them, and now I was being cast aside, relegated to a corner of their lives as if I were an outdated piece of furniture. That night I lay on the thin cot in the garage, the hum of the old refrigerator buzzing like a persistent ache in my ears. Every so often I heard the faint scurrying of what I suspected were mice, their tiny feet skittering across the floor, amplifying my sense of isolation. The air was damp, heavy with the musty scent of neglect, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this space, this cold, cluttered garage, was a metaphor for how my family now saw me. Useful once, but no longer necessary. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, my mind churned with memories of the life I'd built with them, now reduced to this. By morning, resolve had replaced despair. I made an appointment with Linda Chen, an attorney whose name I'd heard through a friend. If I was going to reclaim my dignity, I needed to understand my options. Linda's office was in a sleek brick building in downtown Lakeside Heights, a world away from the garage's grim confines. She was a petite woman with sharp, discerning eyes that seemed to see through to the heart of my pain. Her no-nonsense demeanor was a balm to my frayed nerves. Mrs. Thorne, she said, leaning forward after I'd poured out my story, my voice catching on the betrayal I felt. From what you've shared, you have several potential claims. The money you contributed to their house purchase could be seen as a loan or an investment. The years you spent providing unpaid childcare and managing their household have measurable value, and if there was an understanding, spoken or not, that you'd have a home in exchange for your sacrifices, they can't just change the terms without your consent. I twisted the tissue in my hands, its fibers fraying under my nervous fingers. I don't want to sue my daughter, Miss Chen. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The thought of dragging Allison into a courtroom felt like a betrayal of everything I'd worked for as a mother. Linda's expression softened, but her resolve didn't waver. I understand, she said, but knowledge is power. Right now, you need to know where you stand legally and emotionally. Tell me more about this arrangement. Was anything ever documented? I shook my head, a pang of regret tightening my chest. It was family, I said. I never thought we needed paperwork. The admission felt foolish now, naive in a way I hadn't anticipated. Linda nodded, her sympathy genuine but tempered by pragmatism. That's common, she said, but let's focus on what we can prove. Do you have records of the money you contributed to their house? Yes, I replied, my voice steadier now. I kept the bank transfer statements. Good, she said, jotting notes on her legal pad. And did your daughter or son-in-law ever acknowledge your contributions? Childcare, household work, in writing, texts, emails, cards? I thought of the countless messages over the years, thank you texts after I'd stayed up late helping Liv with homework, Mother's Day cards proclaiming they couldn't manage without me. Yes, I said, a flicker of hope igniting. I believe so. Excellent, Linda said, her pen moving swiftly. Then her tone shifted, her eyes narrowing with concern. Now about your current living situation, do you feel safe in the garage? The question caught me off guard, forcing me to confront the reality I'd been avoiding. Safe? I echoed, hesitating. I suppose it's not comfortable. The temperature swings wildly, there are probably mice, and I'm almost certain there is mold in the bathroom. The words spilled out, each one heavier than the last as I realized how far I'd fallen from the warmth of the main house. Linda set her pen down, her expression grave. Mrs. Thorne, residential spaces must meet habitability standards, even for family members. What you've described doesn't sound legal or safe. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I'm not suggesting we rush to litigation, but a carefully worded letter from my office might help your family see the gravity of your situation. The prospect filled me with dread. What would this do to my relationship with Allison, already strained by unspoken resentments? What about Liv, who still looked at me with love and trust? Linda seemed to sense my turmoil. Consider this, she said gently. By staying silent, you are teaching your granddaughter that it's okay to discard people once they have outlived their usefulness. Is that the lesson you want her to carry forward? Her words struck like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the deeper stakes. I'd spent my life instilling values in children. Respect, fairness, courage. I'd taught Liv to stand up for herself, to value those who loved her. Yet here I was, modeling the opposite by accepting this indignity in silence. The realization was a cold splash of clarity. Write the letter, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But please be diplomatic. I want them to understand what they're doing, not just feel attacked. Linda nodded. I'll draft something for your review. In the meantime, document everything. The condition of the garage, any conversations about your role, any expenses you still cover. And if you have photos showing your involvement with Liv over the years, gather those too. Leaving her office, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions, dread at the confrontation ahead, but also a quiet relief. For the first time in years, someone was fighting for me, not the other way around. That evening, I sat on my cot, scrolling through old photos on my tablet. Liv's first day of kindergarten, her tiny hand clutching mine. Her ballet recital, where I'd painstakingly sewn her costume by hand. The summer I taught her to swim, her laughter echoing in the pool as she conquered her fear of the deep end. Each image was a thread in the tapestry of our bond, now fraying under the weight of my displacement. A knock at the garage door startled me. Willa, can I come in? Derek's voice was tentative, and he stepped inside without waiting for an answer. His eyes scanned the cramped space, lingering on the bare walls and the cot. A flicker of discomfort crossing his face as if he were seeing the reality of his decision for the first time. We're ordering pizza for dinner, he said. Liv asked if you'd eat with us. He paused, then added, how are you settling in? I cut my tablet down, the weight of his question pressing against the anger I'd been holding at bay. It's an adjustment, I said carefully, my voice neutral but laced with the truth. He nodded, clearly unwilling to delve deeper, and turned to leave. But something in me snapped, a spark of courage igniting. Derek, I called, stopping him. Do you remember when Liv had pneumonia in second grade? He paused, hand on the doorknob, his brow furrowing. Vaguely. She was pretty sick. She was hospitalized for 3 days, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. You and Allison were at that real estate conference in San Diego. I sat by her bedside for 72 hours straight. I held her hand through the breathing treatments when she was terrified of the mask. I read her 14 books and watched every episode of that cartoon she loved. His shoulders stiffened, but I pressed on. My point is, I've been more than just help. I've been a parent to Liv when you and Allison couldn't be. And parents don't get shuffled off to garages when they become inconvenient. His expression hardened, a defensive wall rising. We appreciate everything you've done, Willa, but Allison and I need clearer boundaries now. Liv is our daughter. Yes, she is, I agreed, my voice unwavering. And I'd never dispute that. But I'm not just a live-in servant you can tuck away when you're done with me. A flicker of guilt crossed his face, quickly masked. No one's saying that, he said. This is just a transitional solution. Transitioning to what, exactly? I asked, my tone sharper now. Have you and Allison thought about what's next for me? Where I'm supposed to go? How I'm supposed to support myself after giving years to your family? He cleared his throat, grasping for control. You still have your pension and your house in Cherry Creek, which has been rented at below market rate for 12 years because you didn't need the income while living here. I cut in, my voice rising with the injustice. The rent barely covers the property taxes and maintenance. And need I remind you of the money I contributed to this house? Money that was supposed to be repaid? His face closed off completely. I think Allison and I have been more than generous, Willa. We've provided you a place to live for over a decade. Food, utilities, family vacations. It hasn't been one-sided. The audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless, the unfairness burning in my chest. When I spoke again, my voice was steady, resolute. I'll see you at dinner, Derek. And please tell Allison I'd like to have a proper conversation about our arrangement soon. All three of us, with clarity and honesty. After he left, I sat trembling, the weight of my words settling over me. For the first time in years, I challenged Derek's narrative, stood up for myself instead of smoothing things over. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating, like taking a deep breath after years underwater. The next morning, I rose early, clinging to the routine that anchored me. Despite my banishment to the garage, I still prepared breakfast for Liv, cherishing our morning chats. As I scrambled eggs in the main house's kitchen, Allison appeared, dressed for work in a crisp blazer and pencil skirt. Mom, you don't have to keep making breakfast every day, she said, pouring coffee. We can manage. I kept whisking, the rhythm steadying my nerves. I like doing it, I said. Liv and I have our morning talks while she eats. Allison sighed, her frustration palpable. That's part of the problem, Mom. You've woven yourself so deeply into every routine that Liv relies on you for everything. Derek and I need space to parent our own child. I set the whisk down, turning to face her, the hurt rising like a tide. Inserted myself, I repeated, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Allison, you begged me to help. You cried on the phone saying you couldn't take that job without reliable childcare. I gave up my home, my independence, my retirement plans to support your family. That wasn't insertion. That was sacrifice. She looked away, a flush of shame creeping up her cheeks. I know, she said softly, and we're grateful. But things change. Liv's needs change. Our family's needs change. And what about my needs? I asked, my voice breaking. Did you consider those before deciding I should live in a garage? The cold bit at my fingertips as I stood in the dimly lit garage, the air heavy with the musty scent of damp concrete and forgotten boxes. My breath caught in my throat, a quiet ache spreading through my chest as I surveyed the space I now called home. Mice skittered in the shadows, their tiny claws scratching against the floor, and a creeping chill reminded me of last night's low of 58 degrees. The frayed extension cord powering the mini fridge hummed faintly, a small but dangerous rebellion against the neglect of this place. Black mold clung stubbornly to the shower drain and framed the tiny window above, its dark tendrils a silent accusation of disregard. This wasn't a home. It was a storage unit, a place for holiday decorations and gardening tools, not for a woman who had poured her life into her family. Allison's voice trembled with shock when I mentioned the mice. Mice? She gasped, her eyes wide, as if the word itself had scampered across the kitchen counter. Her face, usually so composed, betrayed a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly buried under her usual pragmatism. Mom, if there are mice, we'll call an exterminator. And there's no mold, she said, her tone defensive, as though I'd accused her of something personal. I stirred the eggs in the pot, the sizzle grounding me as I pointed out the truth she hadn't seen or hadn't wanted to see. There's black mold in the shower drain and around the window, Allison. The extension cord is frayed, and last night it was freezing in there. Derek may have cleared a path through the Christmas lights and old shovels, but that's not the same as making it livable. My voice was steady, but inside a storm of hurt and indignation churned. I had given so much, my time, my money, my heart, and yet here I was, relegated to a corner of their lives, a problem to be managed. Allison's expression softened, but only for a moment. I didn't know, she said, her voice small, almost childlike. Derek said he'd made it comfortable. The words hung between us, fragile and inadequate. I could see the weight of her realization, the dawning awareness that her husband's efforts had fallen far short of care. But it wasn't just Derek. Allison had let this happen too, had allowed convenience to eclipse respect. I turned the eggs onto a plate, the simple act anchoring me as I prepared for the conversation I'd been dreading. Allison, we need to talk about what comes next, not just for the next few weeks, but for the long term. My words were firm, a declaration of intent. This wasn't just about a cold garage or a frayed cord. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about demanding the respect I'd earned through years of sacrifice. She glanced at her watch, her realtor's instincts pulling her toward the next appointment. I have a showing at 9. Can we talk tonight? She asked, already halfway to the door, her coffee cup in hand. Yes, after Liv goes to bed, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. And please make sure Derek is there too. She nodded, a quick distracted gesture, and paused at the threshold. Mom, I do love you, she said softly, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment. This isn't about not wanting you in our lives. I managed a small smile, but it didn't reach my heart. I know you love me, honey, I said, my voice steady despite the ache inside. But love without respect isn't enough. Not anymore. The words felt like a line drawn in the sand, a boundary I hadn't realized I needed until now. As Allison left, I turned to Liv, who was sleepily buttering her toast, her small hands moving with the careful precision of a child engrossed in her task. She chattered about her science project, her voice bright with enthusiasm, and I felt a resolve solidify within me. For Liv's sake as much as my own, I needed to show her what it meant to stand up for oneself, to demand dignity, to model the strength and self-respect every woman deserved, no matter her age. Later that day, as I tidied the sparse corner of the garage I'd claimed, my cot, a small lamp, a folding chair that creaked under my weight, my phone chimed. An email from Linda Chen, my attorney, waited in my inbox, its subject line stark and purposeful. Draft letter for review, Thompson family agreement. My heart raced as I opened the attachment, the words on the screen, both a lifeline and a reckoning. Linda's language was firm yet fair, a carefully crafted balance of assertion and hope. The letter detailed my contributions to Allison and Derek's household, the $75,000 I'd given toward their home purchase, a sum they'd promised to repay but never had, the countless hours of childcare and household management, worth tens of thousands annually at market rates, and the emotional labor of being a constant presence for Liv, braiding her hair, packing her lunches, guiding her through homework and heartaches. Most crucially, the letter laid bare the truth about the garage. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was uninhabitable, a breach of the unspoken agreement we'd made when I moved in to help their family thrive. The letter proposed options: repayment of my financial contributions with a clear plan, acknowledgement of my unpaid labor, and a commitment to finding a living arrangement that honored my dignity. It closed with a call for an amicable resolution, but left no doubt that legal action was on the table if needed. My finger hovered over the approve button, the weight of the decision pressing against my chest. This letter would upend everything. Oh yeah, everything. The comfortable denial, the quiet compromises, the years of pretending everything was fine. But then I thought of Liv, her wide eyes watching as her grandmother was moved to a garage, her young mind absorbing lessons about how we treat those who love us. I thought of the values I wanted to instill in her: fairness, respect, the courage to speak up. With a slow exhale, I pressed approve and set the phone down, the decision settling into my bones like a long overdue truth. The garage door creaked open, startling me from my thoughts. Liv stood there, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, her face clouded with concern. "Grandma, why are you really out here?" she asked, her voice direct, unfiltered by the hesitations adults learn to weave into their words. I patted the cot beside me. "Come sit, sweetheart." She dropped her backpack and nestled close, her small hands slipping into mine. I chose my words with care, wanting to protect her without lying. "Your mom and dad felt it was time for some changes in our living arrangement," I said, my voice gentle but steady. Liv's brow furrowed, her logic cutting through the haze of adult rationalizations. "But you took care of me my whole life," she said, her voice tinged with indignation. "You help with my homework, make my lunches, braid my hair the right way. Why would they make you live in the garage?" Her words pierced me, a reminder of the clarity children possess. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Sometimes adults make decisions that aren't always fair," I said, measuring each word. "But I want you to know that no matter where I sleep, I'll always be your grandmother. I'll always love you and be there for you." She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, her warmth a small anchor in the cold garage. "I told Dad it wasn't right," she said quietly. "He told me to mind my own business." A spark of anger flared in my chest, sharp and hot. "Did he now?" I said, keeping my tone even. Liv nodded, her eyes serious. "But you taught me that when something isn't right, we should speak up. That's what you would always say at bedtime." I smiled, remembering our nightly ritual, a story, a life lesson, a kiss on the forehead. How many of those moments would I miss now, banished to this cold, moldy corner? "That's right, Liv," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Speaking up is important, and so is being kind and fair to others, especially those who have cared for us." Her face was solemn, her young mind grappling with the weight of the situation. "I'm going to speak up for you, Grandma," she said, her voice fierce with determination. I hugged her close, my heart swelling with pride and a quiet worry. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, "but this is something the adults need to work out. I don't want you to feel caught in the middle." As she left to start her homework, I sat in the stillness, struck by the wisdom of a child who could see the unfairness her parents had grown blind to. That evening, after a tense family dinner, where Liv pointedly asked why I couldn't sit in my usual chair instead of the wobbly folding one from the garage, I prepared for the conversation with Allison and Derek. I changed into a simple blue dress, one I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences for years, and applied a touch of lipstick. A small act of defiance, a way to feel like Willa the teacher, not Willa the displaced mother-in-law. At 9 o'clock sharp, after Liv was tucked in, I knocked on the door of the main house. Derek opened it, his eyebrows lifting at my appearance. "Come in," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "Allison's in the living room." The living room was pristine, a testament to my efforts just yesterday. Vacuumed carpets, fluffed pillows, watered plants. My touch was everywhere, yet I felt like a stranger. Allison sat on the sofa, her laptop open, her face a mix of exhaustion and wariness. "Mom, we were just looking at some options for you," she said, turning the screen toward me. I sat in the armchair, my back straight, hands folded in my lap. "Before we discuss that," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "I want to talk about how we got here." Derek shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. "Willa, we've already explained." "No, you haven't," I interrupted, my tone gentle but unyielding. "You've made decisions and informed me of them. That's not a discussion between equals, which is what we should be having." Allison's eyes narrowed, a flicker of defensiveness crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that for 12 years I've been an integral part of this family," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside. I've provided childcare that would have cost you $25,000 a year. I've managed this household, cooked meals, supported Liv's education, and been on call every hour of every day. I contributed $75,000 to buy this house, money you promised to repay but never did. And in return, I'm sleeping in a garage that's not even legally habitable. They exchanged a glance, caught off guard by my directness. Allison's voice softened, falling back on familiar platitudes. Mom, we appreciate everything you've done. Appreciation is shown through actions, not words, I said, cutting through her rehearsed response. And your actions tell a different story. Derek leaned forward, his face shifting into the calculated calm he used in business negotiations. What exactly are you saying, Willa? What do you want? I want a fair resolution, I said, my voice unwavering. I want acknowledgement of my contributions. Financial, practical, and emotional. And I want a plan for my future that reflects that acknowledgement. Allison gestured to her laptop. We were looking at some senior living communities, she said, her tone hopeful, as if this were a generous solution. There's one in Pine Valley near Aunt Barb. They have activities, community independence. And who would pay for this? I asked, already knowing the answer. Derek shrugged, his tone matter of fact. You have your pension, and if you sold your house in Cherry Creek, the house that's been rented below market rates because I was here helping your family. I shook my head, the frustration rising but my voice steady. That house is my only financial security, and my pension barely covers basic expenses, as you both know. Allison's expression hardened, a trace of impatience creeping in. Mom, what exactly are you expecting from us? I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over me. I expect to be treated with dignity, I said, each word deliberate. I expect the money I contributed to this house to be repaid, as we originally agreed. And I expect a living arrangement that doesn't exile me to a moldy garage. For over a decade, I'd poured my heart into this family, weaving myself into the fabric of their daily lives with a quiet devotion. I'd expected some acknowledgement, a gesture of gratitude for the countless mornings I'd risen before dawn to care for Liv, the evenings spent helping with homework, the sacrifices I'd made to keep their world spinning smoothly. But as I sat across from Derek and Allison that evening, the air thick with unspoken grievances, it became painfully clear that my expectations had been misplaced. Derek's polished, businesslike smile, the one he wore like armor in boardrooms, vanished when I spoke of fairness. Are you threatening us, Willa? He asked, his voice edged with disbelief as though I'd betrayed some sacred trust. I met his gaze, steady and unyielding, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. I'm not threatening anyone, Derek. I'm simply stating what I deserve after all these years. My words hung in the room, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the pretense of harmony. A heavy silence settled, the kind that amplifies every creak of the house, every shallow breath. Allison, perched rigidly on the edge of her chair, broke it first, her voice taut like a wire about to snap. Let's all take a step back and sleep on this. We can revisit it tomorrow. I nodded, rising from my seat, my movements slow and deliberate. That's reasonable, I said, pausing at the door. But to be perfectly transparent, I've spoken with an attorney, Linda Chen. She's preparing a letter detailing my contributions to this family and the options for a fair resolution. The color drained from Derek's face, his jaw tightening as if I'd struck him. You've hired a lawyer against your own family? His voice cracked, a mix of shock and accusation. I softened my tone, but not my stance. I hired a lawyer to protect my interests, Derek, because it's clear no one else in this family will. The letter will arrive tomorrow. I hope, for Liv's sake, we can settle this with kindness. With that, I turned and left, the weight of their stunned silence trailing me like a shadow. As I crossed the damp lawn to my garage apartment, a sense of lightness bloomed in my chest, fragile but undeniable. For weeks, I'd been suffocating under the weight of unspoken resentment, my worth reduced to a taken-for-granted routine. Now, for the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The path ahead was murky, fraught with uncertainty, but it was mine to walk, on my terms, with my dignity intact. In the dim glow of the garage, surrounded by dusty holiday decorations and gardening tools, I whispered a vow to myself. This isn't the end. It's the opening of a new chapter. one where I reclaim my voice. Chukram. The next morning, rain tapped a restless rhythm against the garage roof, seeping through the worn weather stripping to form a small puddle by the window. A chill clung to the concrete walls, creeping into my bones as I pulled my cardigan tighter. It was 6:30 a.m., my body still tethered to the rhythm of a life I no longer lived. For years, I'd been the first awake, padding through the main house to prepare Liv's oatmeal with a sprinkle of brown sugar and cinnamon. Her favorite. I'd set out her vitamins, pack her lunch with a sandwich cut diagonally just the way she liked it, and sign permission slips while she showered. Now those rituals belonged to someone else, or perhaps to no one at all. The main house was silent, its windows dark against the gray dawn. I wondered if Allison had remembered Liv's field trip permission slip, or if Derek knew to double-check the lunch bag for her water bottle. Through the garage's small window, I watched as the house finally stirred at 7:15, the lights flickering on far later than usual. Liv would be scrambling now, her morning rushed and stressful, a far cry from the calm I'd worked so hard to create. My instinct was to hurry over, to smooth the chaos as I always had, but I stopped myself. This is what they wanted, I thought, the words bitter but firm. A family without my interference. Let them feel the weight of it. By 7:40, the front door flew open, and the three of them spilled out into the rain. Liv's hair was unbrushed, strands clinging to her face as she clutched her backpack. Allison, still buttoning her blazer, looked frazzled, her usual composure fraying at the edges. Derek juggled his briefcase in a crumpled lunch bag, his face set in a grim line. No one carried an umbrella, and the car peeled out of the driveway with a squeal, 10 minutes past the time Liv should have been at school. I sighed, a pang of guilt mixing with my resolve, and began my own morning routine, altered to fit the confines of my new reality. The garage had no shower, so I grabbed my toiletry bag and used my spare key to slip into the main house while they were gone. The kitchen was a wreck, cereal bowls with congealed milk, a pot of scorched oatmeal welded to the stove, coffee pooled on the counter like a dark accusation. For a moment, I stood frozen, torn between the reflex to clean and the determination to let them face the consequences of their choices. Not your mess, Willa, I murmured, forcing myself to walk away. After a quick shower, I returned to the garage, the damp air and faint mustiness, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house I'd once called home. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. A legal letter was delivered to my office this morning. Is this really how you want to play this? We're family. His words stung, but they also hardened my resolve. I typed back, my fingers steady. Family respects and values each other. I'm open to talking once you and Allison have read the letter carefully. No reply came, and I hadn't expected one. Derek always retreated when faced head-on, preferring to plot his next move in silence. At 3:30, I walked the 4 blocks to Liv's bus stop, my heart lifting at the thought of seeing her. For years, those 15 minutes of walking home together had been a treasure. Her stories about school, her questions about the world, her laughter at the squirrels darting across the street. Though Allison and Derek had declared my childcare services unnecessary, no one had forbidden me from meeting her bus. When the yellow school bus hissed to a stop, Liv was the last to step off, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandma," she cried, running into my arms, her small body warm against mine. "You came?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. "How was school?" As we walked, she chattered about her science project on ecosystems, a playground spat between friends, and the praise her teacher had given her book report. Her voice was a balm, grounding me in the midst of the storm swirling around us. But then, her tone shifted, quieter now, as she kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "Mom was really mad this morning. She couldn't find my permission slip, and Dad burned the oatmeal." "Mornings can be tough," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. "You always had everything ready," she said, her clear eyes meeting mine. "Mom says we have to get used to a new routine, but I don't know why we need one." Before I could find the right words, she added, "Tyler from my class said when his grandma got old, they put her in a home with other old people. Is that what's happening to you?" Her question hit like a blow, stealing my breath. "Who said anything about that, Liv?" "I heard Mom and Dad talking last night after you went to the garage. Dad mentioned senior options, and Mom was looking at websites. We'd reached the driveway and I knelt to meet her gaze, ignoring the ache in my knees. Liv, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere unless I choose to. You and I will always be close no matter what. You're my girl, and nothing changes that. She nodded, her eyes solemn. Promise? I promise, Om. I stood, offering her a smile as we headed toward the house. Now let's get you inside and tackle that homework. But you don't live inside anymore, she said, her words cutting deeper than she could know. I'm still allowed to visit, I replied, forcing brightness into my voice. Come on, I'll help with those ecosystem diagrams. As we approached the front door, it swung open, revealing Allison, still in her work clothes, her face a storm of surprise and irritation. Mom, what are you doing? I was about to leave to get Liv from the bus. No need, I said lightly. I was out for a walk and met her like always. Allison's jaw tightened. We agreed Derek and I would handle Liv's schedule now. Did we? I tilted my head, my tone conversational but firm. I don't recall a specific discussion about the bus stop. Besides, it seemed silly not to meet her since I was nearby. Allison's eyes narrowed. We got your lawyer's letter this morning. Good, I said, holding her gaze. Then you understand where I stand. I understand you've chosen to make this a fight instead of resolving it as a family. Her words were sharp, but beneath them I glimpsed a flicker of hurt, a daughter grappling with a mother she no longer recognized. I chose to stand up for myself when it became clear you and Derek wouldn't, I said softly. There's a difference. Behind her, Liv hovered in the hallway, her eyes darting between us, sensing the tension like a deer in a clearing. Can Grandma help with my science project? She asked, her voice small. She knows all about ecosystems from when she was a teacher. Allison hesitated, torn between her anger and her desire to shield Liv from the conflict. Fine, she said finally. But dinner's at 6, and afterward, we need to talk, Mom. I nodded and followed Liv to the dining room, where she spread out her markers and notebook. For the next hour, we worked on her forest ecosystem diagram, labeling producers, consumers, and decomposers. Teaching her, guiding her questions, watching her face light up with understanding. It was a refuge, a return to a role that had always felt right. At 6, Derek walked through the door, his expression darkening when he saw me at the table with Liv. Without a word, he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving a chill in his wake. The weight of the coming conversation pressed against my chest, but I straightened my shoulders, ready to face whatever lay ahead. For Liv, for myself, for the new chapter I was determined to write. The aroma of chicken casserole filled the kitchen, mingling with the faint tension that seemed to cling to every surface. I stood at the counter, chopping vegetables with a rhythmic precision that belied the storm brewing inside me. From the dining room, I could hear Derek and Allison's voices, low and urgent, their words indistinct but heavy with meaning. My heart thudded dully in my chest, a mix of dread and resolve. I knew they were discussing the letter from my attorney, the one that had shattered the fragile pretense of harmony in this house. Dinner was an exercise in restraint. The table was set with care, but the atmosphere was brittle, like glass waiting to crack. Derek focused his attention on Liv, his voice warm as he asked about her school project, her day, her dreams. Liv's face lit up, her chatter a bright spot in the gloom, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the way they darted between her parents and me, sensing the unspoken conflict. Allison, meanwhile, wore a smile so tight it looked painful, her movements mechanical as she served the casserole, a dish that had once been my signature, now marred by undercooked rice and edges scorched to a bitter brown. I took a bite, forcing a polite nod. It's lovely, Allison, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. She murmured a thank you, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I ate in silence, my thoughts churning. For years, I had poured myself into this family, cooking, cleaning, caring for Liv, holding space for their joys and sorrows. I had been their anchor, their invisible foundation. And yet here I was, relegated to the garage, my contributions dismissed, my future uncertain. The casserole tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed it down, determined to keep my composure. After Liv was excused to finish her homework, the air grew heavier. Derek cleared his throat, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Willa, he began, his tone clipped, about this letter from your attorney. I met his gaze, sipping my water to steady myself. Yes, I replied, my voice calm but firm. He leaned forward, his businessman facade firmly in place. Some of these claims are frankly absurd. 300,000 for household management and childcare. A demand for repayment of 75,000 plus interest? The suggestion that we've provided substandard housing. His voice rose slightly, laced with indignation. Are you serious? I set my glass down, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. Are they absurd, Derek? I asked, my tone measured. The going rate for a full-time nanny in this area is about $25 an hour. Over 12 years, working around the clock, that adds up to far more than what the letter requests. As for the $75,000, that was a loan explicitly agreed upon to help with your down payment. You and Allison promised to repay it when your finances stabilized. And the housing. I gestured around the pristine dining room, then let my hand fall. I wasn't talking about this house. I meant the uninsulated, half-flooded garage where I'm currently sleeping, surrounded by holiday decorations and gardening tools. Allison's face flushed a deep crimson, her lips parting as if to speak. But no words came. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt, perhaps, or shame. Mom, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. We never signed anything about repaying that money. It was a gift. My heart twisted, but I kept my voice even. It was not a gift, Allison. We discussed the terms clearly. I have the emails where you both thanked me for the loan and promised to pay it back. I would never have given away that much of my retirement savings. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken truths. I had trusted them, believed in their gratitude, their promises, and now I was paying the price for that trust. Derek's composure faltered, a crack in his polished exterior. Even if that's true, he said, his voice tight, this approach is completely unnecessary. We're family, Willa. We could have worked something out without dragging lawyers into it. I tilted my head, studying him. When, Derek? Before or after you moved me to the garage without so much as a conversation? Before or after you started researching senior living facilities behind my back? Allison's eyes widened, her breath catching. Yes, I continued, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I know about that. Liv overheard you. Derek muttered a curse under his breath, his fingers raking through his hair. She shouldn't be eavesdropping on adult conversations. Idina shouldn't have to hear her parents plotting to send her grandmother to a facility either. I shot back, my words sharp but controlled. Derek, Allison, I'm not doing this to hurt you or to seek revenge. I'm doing it because I need security for my future. And you've shown me I can't rely on you to consider my needs or respect my wishes. Allison's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands twisting in her lap. Mom, that's not fair, she said, her voice breaking. We've provided for you for 12 years. I shook my head, a quiet sorrow settling over me. No, Allison, I've provided for this family for 12 years. Free childcare, household management, emotional support. I've been on call every hour of every day with no vacations, no personal time, no recognition of the value of my work. And now that Liv is more independent, I'm suddenly disposable. I folded my napkin with deliberate care, placing it beside my plate. That's what's not fair. Derek's mask snapped back into place, his voice cool and detached. What do you want, Willa? Money? Your old room back? What will make this situation go away? The dismissal in his tone, the way he reduced my legitimate grievances to a mere situation, solidified my resolve. I had made the right choice in seeking legal counsel. I want what the letter outlines, I said, my voice firm. Acknowledgement of my contributions, repayment of the loan with reasonable interest, and either proper housing here or compensation so I can secure my own place. I'm not trying to ruin you or take Liv away. I'm trying to ensure I have security and dignity in the years I have left. Derek exchanged a glance with Allison, their silent communication fraught with tension. We'll need to discuss this privately, he said at last. I rose from the table, smoothing my skirt. Of course, I'll say goodnight to Liv before I go back to the garage. As I passed through the living room, Liv looked up from her homework, her pencil pausing mid-sentence. "Are you and Mom and Dad fighting?" she asked, her voice small. I sat beside her on the sofa, my heart aching at the worry in her eyes. "We're having a disagreement about grown-up things," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I want you to know that we all love you so much, and nothing will ever change that." She leaned against me, her warmth a balm to my weary soul. "I don't want you to go away, Grandma." "I know, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Whatever happens, you and I will always have our special bond. Now finish your homework and get ready for bed. I'll see you tomorrow." The walk to the garage was cold, the light rain soaking through my sweater. Inside, the air was damp and sharp, the smell of mildew mingling with the faint scent of pine from the Christmas decorations stacked nearby. I felt drained, my bones heavy with the weight of the confrontation, but beneath it all was a spark of empowerment. For years, I had avoided conflict, smoothed over disagreements, put everyone else's needs before my own. Now, for the first time since Robert's death 15 years ago, I was standing up for myself, demanding the respect I deserved. I called Barbara, my voice steady as I updated her. "They got the letter this morning," I said. "Derek's furious about the attorney, and Allison's hurt, but they're finally talking about my needs instead of brushing them aside." "Good," Barbara said, her voice warm with approval. "It's about time they thought of someone besides themselves. How are you holding up in that garage?" "My offer to stay with me still stands." "I appreciate it, Barb," I said, smiling despite myself. "But I need to see this through. If I leave now, they'll twist the story. Poor Mom, overreacting and running off instead of talking things out." "You're stronger than I am," she said with a laugh. "I'd have told them where to shove their gardening tools the moment they suggested the garage." I chuckled, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. "That's why I was always bailing you out of trouble when we were kids." After hanging up, I prepared for bed as best I could, layering on 2 sweaters to ward off the chill. The cot was hard, the thin blanket offering little warmth, but I was grateful for the practical clothes I'd packed. Sleep was elusive, my mind racing with possibilities. My attorney, Linda, had outlined several paths forward. The most aggressive involved a lawsuit for elder financial abuse and breach of contract, seeking not just the loan repayment, but substantial damages for my unpaid labor. The thought made my stomach churn. I had no desire for such a bitter fight, no matter how justified. My preference was a structured agreement. Repayment of the loan over time, acknowledgement of my contributions, and either proper housing or financial support for independent living, with regular visits to Liv. Around midnight, a soft knock startled me. I sat up, switching on the floor lamp. "Yes?" I called. The door creaked open, revealing Allison in her bathrobe, her bare feet pale against the cold concrete. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice tremulous. I shifted to make room on the cot. "Of course." She sat beside me, her eyes scanning the garage as if seeing it for the first time. The damp walls, the cluttered boxes, the flickering bulb overhead. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. "It's freezing in here," she said, hugging herself. "Yes," I replied, my voice neutral. "The insulation is minimal and there's no proper heating." She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "I didn't really look at this space before we decided. Derek said he'd make it comfortable." "Derek's idea of comfortable and mine are apparently quite different," I said, a hint of wryness in my tone. She was quiet for a moment, then turned to me, her eyes searching. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you really think Derek and I would take advantage of you, after everything we've been through as a family?" I considered my words carefully, my heart heavy with the weight of truth. "I don't think you set out to exploit me, Allison. But I do think you both grew accustomed to the conveniences I provided. Childcare, cooking, cleaning, always being there. And when those conveniences weren't as necessary, it was easier to push me aside than to rethink our relationship in a way that honored my contributions and needs." She flinched, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The letter said you contributed $75,000 to our down payment. Was that really a loan?" "Yes," I said firmly. "We discussed it clearly. You and Derek were struggling to qualify for the mortgage. I offered to help with the understanding that you'd repay me when your careers were more stable." I don't remember it that way, she said, her voice faltering. But her expression held a flicker of doubt, a crack in her certainty. Why didn't you bring it up before now? I sighed, the weight of years pressing down on me. Because you were building your lives, raising Liv, chasing your dreams. I didn't want to burden you. I trusted you'd honor our agreement when the time came. But now with the garage, the talk of senior facilities, I can't afford to wait any longer. She nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. I didn't realize how this must feel for you. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. I know, Allison, but we need to find a way forward that respects us all. She nodded again, her tears spilling over. I'll talk to Derek. We'll figure something out. Ooh, as she left, the garage felt a little less cold, a little less lonely. I lay back on the cot, staring at the shadowed ceiling, a quiet hope flickering in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a servant, not as a burden, but as Willa, a woman with her own needs, her own worth, her own future. The rain drummed steadily on the garage roof, a relentless reminder of the damp chill seeping into Wilhelmina Thorne's bones. Willa, as she was known, sat on the edge of her cot, her gaze drifting over the makeshift space she'd been relegated to, a stack of plastic storage bins doubling as a nightstand, and extension cords snaking across the concrete floor to power a flickering lamp and a humming mini-fridge. The weight of betrayal pressed against her chest, heavier than the cold. She had given so much, nearly half her retirement savings, years of childcare, countless hours managing her daughter's household. And yet, here she was, cast aside like an afterthought. The garage wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a symbol of her diminished worth in the eyes of those she loved most. Allison, her daughter, sat across from her on a folding chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, avoiding Willa's eyes. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the patter of rain and the occasional swoosh of a car passing on the wet street outside. Willa's heart ached as she studied Allison's face, searching for the girl who once clung to her for comfort. She remembered the late nights helping Allison build her real estate career, the early mornings packing lunches for Liv, her granddaughter, and the quiet pride she felt watching her daughter's family thrive. She had trusted them, believed in their unspoken promise to honor the sacrifices she'd made. But now that trust felt like a fragile thread, frayed and close to snapping. Allison, Willa began, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. When I gave you and Derek that money, it wasn't a gift. It was a loan, a firm plan we discussed. I wouldn't have parted with nearly half my retirement savings. Money your father and I worked decades to save, without expecting repayment. I trusted you'd honor that when the time came. Allison's gaze dropped to her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. Guilt flickered across her face and Willa felt a pang of sorrow. She didn't want to hurt her daughter, but the truth had to be spoken. I spoke to Derek after dinner, Allison admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He remembers something about repayment, but he thought it was just talk, not a real commitment. Willa's jaw tightened, a spark of frustration igniting within her. It was real, Allison. I checked market rates before I had Linda include the child care and household management figures in that letter. They're conservative, if anything. I didn't do this to punish you, but to show you the value of what I've given. The silence returned, heavier now, as Allison processed her mother's words. Willa's mind wandered to the years she'd spent in their home, cooking dinners, folding laundry, driving Liv to school. She'd done it out of love, but also because she believed her contributions were seen, valued. The garage told a different story, a story of being taken for granted, of her worth reduced to utility. The thought stung, sharp and deep. Finally, Allison spoke, her voice small and trembling. I've been unfair to you, Mom. I've taken you for granted. We both have. The admission hung in the air, a fragile bridge between them. Willa had waited years to hear those words, but they brought no joy, only a quiet, aching vindication. She wanted to reach out, to comfort her daughter, but the hurt held her back. Thank you for saying that, Willa said softly, her tone gentle but firm. What do you want to happen now? Allison hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Do you want to move back into the house? The question stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Willa. She pictured the guest room she'd occupied for 12 years, with its soft bed and warm light, a stark contrast to the cold, cluttered garage. But moving back wasn't so simple. It wasn't just about comfort. It was about dignity, respect, and a relationship with her family that wasn't built on what she could do for them. "I want a living situation that gives me dignity and comfort," she said, her voice steady. "I want my contributions, financial and otherwise, to be acknowledged. And I want a relationship with you, Derek, and Liv that isn't based on how useful I am." Allison nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Those are reasonable wants," she whispered. "They are," Willa agreed, her voice tinged with pain. "That's why the garage hurt so much. It made me feel like you and Derek no longer saw me as worthy of even basic respect." She gestured to the Keaton, the bins, the extension cord. "This isn't a place for a guest, let alone your mother." Allison's gaze followed her mother's, and her face crumpled as she took in the stark reality of the space. "You're right," she said, her voice breaking. "This isn't acceptable." She stood abruptly, her movements jerky with emotion. "Pack your things, you're moving back inside tonight." Willa shook her head, a quiet resolve settling over her. "No, Allison, not tonight, and not without a real plan. A moment of guilt isn't enough to fix what's been broken. I need to know you and Derek have thought through what's fair for all of us." Allison's face fell, hurt flashing in her eyes. "You don't trust me." "I trust that you mean what you say right now," Willa said gently. "But I need more than a spur-of-the-moment decision. I need a thoughtful plan that respects everyone's needs and boundaries." Allison was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "That's fair. Derek and I will talk tomorrow and come up with something concrete." She hesitated, glancing around the chilly garage. "But at least let me get you some more blankets. It's freezing in here." After Allison returned with an armful of warm bedding, they said goodnight. As the door closed behind her daughter, Willa wrapped herself in the blankets, a flicker of hope warming her heart. The conversation had been raw, honest in a way she hadn't experienced with Allison in years. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. The next morning, Willa woke to the sound of voices outside the garage door. Her phone read 7:32 a.m., and she realized Liv must already be on her way to school. Dressing quickly, she opened the door to find Derek standing with a stranger, both studying the garage's exterior. Derek's posture was tense, his discomfort palpable. "Good morning," Willa said cautiously, her eyes flicking between the two men. Derek turned, his expression uneasy. "Willa, this is Hector. He's a contractor. We're getting an estimate on converting the space into a proper legal apartment." Willa blinked, surprise washing over her. "I see." Hector nodded respectfully. "Morning, ma'am. From what I can tell, we'd need insulation, electrical upgrades for safe heating, plumbing for a bathroom, and sealing against water leaks. It's a big job." Derek's face was unreadable as he asked, "How long would it take?" 6 to 8 weeks, minimum, depending on permits and materials," Hector replied. Derek turned to Willa, his voice measured. "Allison and I talked this morning. We'd like you to move back into the guest room while we sort this out properly." Willa studied him, searching for signs of resentment or manipulation, but found only a weary acceptance. Her heart softened, but her caution remained. "That's thoughtful," she said. "It's not thoughtful," Derek countered, his voice tight. "It's basic decency, which we should have shown from the start." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic Willa recognized from years of watching him. "Willa, about the loan, I checked our old emails last night. You're right. We discussed repayment explicitly. I convinced myself it was a gift because it was easier than admitting we owed you." The admission, clearly painful for him, eased some of Willa's guardedness. "Thank you for acknowledging that, Derek. We can't repay the full amount right away," he continued, "but we can start a payment plan and make sure you have proper living arrangements in the meantime." "That sounds reasonable," Willa said, still wary of his sudden shift. Derek glanced at Hector, who had stepped away to inspect the garage's foundation. "Allison told me about your talk last night, about feeling unvalued after everything you've done for us." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She was right. You were right. We've taken advantage of your generosity, your love for Liv. When our finances stabilized, we should have revisited our arrangement, compensated you fairly, ensured your security. Instead, We just kept taking. Willa's chest tightened at his words. She hadn't expected this level of candor from Derek, whose pride often kept him guarded. What changed? She asked, genuinely curious. Why now? Derek gave a rueful smile. Two things. First, reading Linda's letter and seeing the market value of your contributions in black and white, it hit me hard. Second, Liv came to me this morning before school and said, Dad, Grandma taught me we have to fix our mistakes, not just say sorry. Kids, huh? Willa's heart swelled with pride for Liv, who had absorbed the lessons of accountability she'd tried to instill. So what happens now? She asked. You move back into the house while we work out a written agreement that acknowledges your contributions and sets fair terms moving forward, Derek said. And we'll involve Linda Chen, because I understand you want legal guidance. We'll work with her to draft something that protects everyone. As Willa gathered her belongings from the garage, a sense of surreal change washed over her. Just days ago, she'd been resigned to her exile, swallowing her hurt in silence. Now she was reclaiming her voice, her worth. By mid-morning, she was settled back in the guest room, the familiar comfort of a real bed and a warm bathroom, feeling like a small miracle after the garage's starkness. Allison had taken the day off work, a rare move that underscored the gravity of their situation. Around 11 a.m., she knocked on Willa's door, carrying a tray with tea and scones, Willa's favorite, a treat she'd often made for her daughter. Mom, may I come in? She asked, her voice tentative. Willa gestured to the small sitting area in the corner. Of course. Allison set down the tray and sat across from her, her hands fidgeting. I called Linda Chen's office this morning, and she said, her words rushed. I asked if we could schedule a mediation session with you, me, Derek, and your attorney to work out a fair agreement that recognizes everything you have done and secures your future. Willa's eyebrows rose, impressed by her daughter's initiative. That's a constructive step, Allison. I also asked about the legal requirements for a proper in-law suite, Allison added, her voice softer now. I know we've broken your trust, and you might want to live on your own now. But if you'd like to stay close to Liv, we could convert the garage properly, or even add an extension to the house. Willa considered the offer, her heart torn between the idea of independence and the pull of family, especially Liv. I'm not sure what's best yet, she said honestly. But I'm grateful you're thinking about options that would keep me near Liv. Allison's eyes brimmed with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom, she choked out. When I think about you sleeping in that cold garage after all you've done for us. Her voice broke, and she covered her face, her shoulders trembling. Willa's heart twisted at the sight of her daughter's pain. She wanted to comfort her, to say everything was forgiven, but she knew the path to healing would be long. Instead, she reached out and gently squeezed Allison's hand. We'll take it one step at a time, she said, her voice soft but resolute. Let's focus on the mediation and finding a way forward that works for all of us. As they sipped tea in the quiet of the guest room, Willa felt a cautious hope taking root. The wounds were deep, and the trust would need the time to mend. But for the first time in years, she sensed a genuine willingness from Allison and Derek to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't a perfect, but it was a beginning, a chance to reclaim not just a home, but a family. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing against Allison's trembling hands, which she'd pressed against her face as if to shield herself from the weight of the moment. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, flickered with guilt and something softer. Regret, perhaps. Allison, Anita said, my voice steady but heavy with the ache of betrayal. The pain I felt wasn't just about being shuffled out to the garage like an old piece of furniture. It was the gut-wrenching realization that my presence, my years of love and sacrifice, seemed to hold no value anymore, except in the most minimal, obligatory sense. The words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, carrying the sting of truth I'd carried silently for too long. Allison's breath hitched, and she shook her head, her protest fragile, barely audible. That's not true, she whispered, but the words lacked conviction, like a reflex rather than a belief. She knew deep down that actions spoke louder than any defense she could muster. Moving me to the cold, cluttered garage while she and Derek quietly researched senior living facilities wasn't just a logistical decision. It was a message, loud and clear, that I was no longer a vital part of their lives. It was a dismissal, A relegation to the margins of the family I'd poured my heart into for 12 years. The memory of that moment, standing in the garage, surrounded by dusty boxes and the hum of a flickering fluorescent light, still twisted in my chest, a dull ache that refused to fade. Allison flinched, her face crumpling as my words landed. "When you say it like that," she said, her voice trembling, "it sounds so cruel." "It felt cruel," I replied, my tone calm but unyielding. 12 years, Allison. 12 years of devotion to this family. Cooking meals, tending the garden, raising Liv with every ounce of love I had. And in return, I was sent to a place you wouldn't dream of putting a weekend guest. My bluntness made her wince again, but she didn't argue. The truth was undeniable, and for once she seemed to feel its full weight. Her silence was an admission, a crack in the wall we'd both built around the hurt. "What can we do to fix this?" she asked, her voice small, almost childlike, as if she were grasping for a lifeline. I leaned back, cradling my tea, the warmth of the mug grounding me as I considered her question. Fixing this wasn't about apologies or quick gestures. It required something deeper, something real. "We start with honesty," I said, my gaze steady on hers. "We face what happened, no sugarcoating. We respect each other's needs, contributions, and dignity. And above all, we make sure Liv understands that families don't cast aside their members when they become inconvenient. Care and respect, they're lifelong promises, not favors to be withdrawn when they're no longer easy." Allison nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek as she wiped it away with a shaky hand. "Those are good principles," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "They're the foundation we need to rebuild on." "They're the same principles I raised you with," I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips despite the ache in my heart. "The ones we've both tried to instill in Liv." Her lips curved into a small, bittersweet smile, and for a moment the tension between us softened. "Liv's the one who really called us out," she said, a spark of pride breaking through her tears. "This morning she looked Derek square in the eye and asked why we thought it was okay to treat you like old furniture we didn't want anymore, but were too lazy to throw out." Her words, not mine. I couldn't help but laugh, the sound surprising me with its warmth. Liv, with her sharp wit and fearless honesty, had a way of cutting through the noise to the heart of things. "She's perceptive," I said, my heart swelling with love for my granddaughter. "She's not afraid to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Wonder where she gets that from." Allison's smile widened, a flicker of the old connection we used to share. It felt fragile, like the first green shoot pushing through the soil after a long, harsh winter. A sign of life, delicate but brimming with possibility. In that moment, I felt a spark of hope, not just for reconciliation, but for something new, something built on mutual respect. That afternoon, my phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Linda Chen, the attorney Allison had contacted about scheduling a mediation session. Her voice was calm and professional, but there was a warmth beneath it, a quiet approval that put me at ease. "Mrs. Thorne," she began, "your daughter reached out to me about setting up a mediation. This is a positive step. Often the simple act of receiving a formal legal letter can prompt serious reflection and open the door to meaningful negotiation. How are you feeling about this?" I paused, letting her question settle. "Cautiously optimistic," I said finally. "They've moved me back into the house, and both Allison and Derek have acknowledged in their own ways that how they treated me was wrong. It's progress, but it's just the beginning." "That's excellent," Linda replied, her tone encouraging. "Before we move forward with mediation, I'd like you to think about what your ideal outcome looks like, not just in terms of finances or living arrangements, but your relationship with your family and your own sense of autonomy." Her words caught me off guard, like a sudden gust of wind. For so long, I defined myself through my role as a mother, a grandmother, a caretaker, always putting others' needs before my own. The idea of articulating what I wanted, independent of them, felt almost rebellious, a foreign territory I hadn't dared to explore. "I'll need to think about that," I admitted, my voice softer now. "For years, my identity has been tied to their lives. I'm not sure I even know what I want for myself." "That's a common challenge for caregivers," Linda said gently. "Take your time, Mrs. Thorne. This isn't just about addressing past wrongs. It's about creating a future that honors your needs and your independence. After we hung up, I sat by the window in my proper room, the one with the soft bed and warm blankets that felt like a reclaimed piece of my dignity. Outside, the garden I'd tended for 12 years stretched before me, the rose bushes overgrown and the bird feeder empty. Those small tasks, pruning, filling the feeder, had once been the rhythm of my days, my contribution to the beauty and order of this home. But now as I gazed out, Linda's question echoed in my mind. What did I want, independent of my role as grandmother and caretaker? It was both liberating and terrifying, a door I'd never fully opened. I pulled out a notebook, my hands trembling slightly as I began to write. At first, the words came slowly, tentative, like steps into uncharted territory. But as I wrote, ideas began to flow. Practical ones, like a small apartment of my own where I could host Liv for sleepovers, and fanciful ones, like taking an art class or traveling somewhere I'd never been. By the time I heard Liv's voice calling from downstairs, announcing her return from school, I'd filled 3 pages with possibilities, each one a piece of a future that was authentically mine. Grandma! Liv appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of me back in my room, not the garage. You're inside again. I set my notebook aside and opened my arms, my heart swelling as she rushed to hug me. I am indeed, I said, holding her close. Dad said you're staying for real now, not in the garage, she said, her eyes searching mine. Did you and Mom and Dad fix things? We're working on it, I said honestly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. These kinds of misunderstandings take time to sort out completely. She nodded, her expression wise beyond her years. Like when Casey and I had that big fight last year, and it took all whole semester to be real friends again. Exactly like that, I said, smiling. But the important thing is that we're all trying to understand each other and make things right. Liv settled beside me on the window seat, her shoulder warm against mine. Dad said we need to renegotiate our arrangement, she said, the adult phrase sounding comically formal in her young voice. What does that mean? I chuckled softly. It means we're figuring out new ways to be a family that work for everyone. You're growing up, becoming more independent, and that changes things. My role is changing too. She tilted her head, considering this. But you're still my grandma, right? That doesn't change? Never at them, I said, my voice firm with conviction. No matter what happens, I'll always be your grandmother, and I'll always love you. She leaned against me, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching a pair of cardinals flit around the empty bird feeder. After a moment, she said, I'm glad you called the attorney lady. Dad was really mad at first, but then he said, sometimes people need a wake-up call. Her simple wisdom made me smile. Your dad's right, I said, my heart warming at her perceptiveness. Sometimes we all need a little help to see things clearly, especially when emotions get in the way. As the afternoon light slanted through the window, bathing us in a soft golden glow, I felt a deep sense of peace, not because everything was resolved, but because I'd found my voice after years of silence. The garage episode had been a painful wound, but it had also given me something invaluable. The courage to advocate for myself, to demand the respect I deserved, and to shape my future on my own terms. In standing up for my worth, I'd also shown Liv what it meant to hold your head high, a lesson I hoped would guide her through her own life. The days leading up to the mediation session on Friday felt like a strange limbo. I was back in the house, my proper room, a quiet sanctuary, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Allison and Derek were polite, even attentive, but their kindness felt performative, a careful dance around the fracture in our relationship. I stuck to my routines with Liv, making her breakfast, greeting her after school, but I deliberately stepped back from the household tasks that had defined my role for years. The laundry piled up in silent heaps. Dinner became a rotation of takeout containers. The kitchen untouched by my once constant presence. The subtle chaos was both validating and bittersweet, proof of how much I'd contributed, but also a reminder of how fragile the threads of family life could be. On Wednesday evening, as I sat in my room reviewing notes for the mediation, a soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Willa? Derek's voice was tentative, almost unrecognizable. I set my papers aside. Come in. He stepped inside, his usual air of unshakable confidence replaced by something softer, more vulnerable. Derek Thompson, the man who'd built a career on certainty, stood before me looking like a stranger, hesitant, unsure, and carrying the weight of his own regrets. Derek settled into the chair across from me, his posture hesitant yet deliberate, as though he'd rehearsed this moment. Without the buffer of lawyers or mediators, the air between us felt raw, charged with unspoken history. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, neither inviting nor shutting him out, waiting to see what he'd come to say. I've been wrestling with a lot since that letter arrived, he began, raking a hand through his hair, a nervous tick I'd seen countless times over the years. His voice carried a weight I wasn't used to hearing. At first I was furious. It felt like a knife in the back, legal action from family, of all things. I couldn't wrap my head around it. He paused, his eyes searching mine for a reaction, but I held steady, letting him unravel his thoughts. But then I realized it wasn't about lawsuits or betrayal. It was you standing up for yourself, advocating for what you're owed. I get that now. His words caught me off guard. Derek had always been a master at spinning narratives, casting himself as the reasonable one, the hero of his own story. Hearing him admit fault, even indirectly, stirred a flicker of surprise in me. He leaned forward, his expression tightening. When I saw the numbers, your financial contributions, what your time and work would have cost us if we'd paid market rates, it hit me like a freight train. I had to face how much we've taken from you, Willa. And the worst part? He swallowed hard, his voice dropping. Deep down, I think I knew it all along. I knew we were getting far more than we gave. I didn't want to look too closely. It was easier to let things slide, to keep benefiting from your generosity. The confession hung between us, heavy and unadorned. My chest tightened, a mix of vindication and weariness washing over me. For years, I'd poured myself into their lives, and to hear him acknowledge it now, however belatedly, felt like a small victory, but one tinged with bitterness. Why had it taken a lawyer's letter to force this clarity? Why tell me this now, I asked, my tone measured but probing. Derek met my gaze, his eyes steady for the first time. Because I want you to know I understand why you did what you did. I don't blame you. Not anymore. He exhaled as if unburdening himself. And I want you to know that whatever we agree to on Friday, I'm in, all the way. Not just the legal terms, but the spirit of it. I want to make this right. I studied him, searching for the catch. This was a seismic shift for Derek, whose promises had often been more about optics than sincerity. That's a big change, I said, my voice edged with skepticism. He gave a rueful smile, the kind that carried a hint of self-awareness. Yeah, well, having your mother-in-law's attorney lay out in black and white how you've been profiting off her work for a decade tends to wake you up. Despite myself, I felt a small smile tug at my lips. I bet it does, I replied, the moment loosening the tension just a fraction. But Derek's face grew serious again, his hands clasped tightly on the table. There's something else you should know. Before Liv came along, Allison and I, we were in rough shape. You probably sensed some of it, but we kept the worst private. We were on the brink of divorce, Willa. I mean, papers drafted, lawyers consulted close. This was a revelation, a crack in the polished facade they'd always maintained. I leaned back, processing the weight of it. I had no idea, I said softly, my mind already sifting through memories of those early years, searching for signs I'd missed. We didn't want anyone to know, he continued. But when you stepped in to help with childcare, it wasn't just about logistics. It was a lifeline. It gave us breathing room, not just to focus on our careers, but to rebuild what was breaking between us. Without the constant stress of juggling work and a newborn, we found our way back to each other. You didn't just help us, Willa. You saved our marriage. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through my understanding of the past 12 years. I'd always seen my role as practical. Meals cooked, diapers changed, a house kept running, but to hear it framed this way, as the foundation of their life together, shifted something in me. I'm glad I could be there for you both, I said, meaning it, though the words felt inadequate for the emotions swirling inside. even if I didn't know the full story. Derek leaned closer, his voice earnest. You did more than be there. You gave us the life we have now, live, our home, our stability, which makes how we've treated you lately unforgivable. His admission was raw, unguarded, and for the first time I saw not just regret, but shame in his eyes. The conversation left me adrift in a sea of conflicting feelings. Derek's acknowledgement was validating, a long overdue recognition of my sacrifices. Yet it also underscored how invisible I'd been to them for so long, my contributions taken for granted until a legal threat forced them to see me. That night, I called Barbara, needing her sharp perspective to ground me. So they've done a complete 180, huh? She said, her voice dripping with skepticism. Just like that? Not exactly, I replied, sinking into the couch. The attorney's letter shook them, and I think seeing me push back for once rattled them even more. Derek's talking about fairness now, but it's hard to trust it's genuine. Good, Barbara said, her tone fierce. It's about damn time they realize they can't just use you up and toss you aside when it suits them. Her bluntness, as always, cut through the fog of my doubts, reminding me why I'd fought for this in the first place. What do you want out of this mediation? She asked, her voice softening. I paused, the question forcing me to crystallize my swirling thoughts. Financial security, for one, acknowledgement of everything I've done, and a relationship with Liv that doesn't hinge on me being their unpaid nanny. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I need to figure out where I fit in all this. And living arrangements? You staying with them? That's still up in the air, I admitted. We'll hash it out Friday. After we hung up, I returned to my notes, jotting down insights from Derek's words. Linda, my attorney, had urged me to clarify my priorities before mediation, knowing what I wouldn't budge on and where I could compromise. The money was straightforward, repayment of the $75,000 loan with interest, plus compensation for 12 years of childcare and household work. But the rest, where I'd live, how I'd stay connected to Liv, what kind of relationship I'd have with Derek and Allison, was murkier. Did I want to stay in their home with a proper space of my own? Did I want a place nearby balancing independence with proximity to Liv? Or did I want to start over entirely? Maybe near Barbara and Pine Valley, where I could redefine myself outside the role of grandmother. Each path had its pull. Staying meant being close to Liv, but risked slipping back into old habits of overgiving. A nearby home offered freedom while keeping Liv in my life. Pine Valley promised a fresh start, but at the cost of distance from my granddaughter. Beneath it all was a deeper question. Who was I without this family? What could I become if I dared to put myself first? Friday morning broke clear and sharp, the kind of day that felt like a turning point. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy suit I'd once worn to parent-teachers conferences, professional, but not cold. But as I applied a touch of lipstick, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was different, her eyes clearer, her jaw set with quiet resolve. She looked like someone who'd finally claimed her own worth. Downstairs, Derek and Allison waited, both dressed as if heading to a boardroom. The drive to Linda's office was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. As we passed the park where I'd pushed Liv on swings, the library where we'd weathered rainy days, nostalgia tugged at me, but it was laced with determination. Today would shape the next chapter of our lives. Linda Chen's office was on the third floor of a stately brick building downtown. Her assistant ushered us into a conference room where Linda waited with another attorney, presumably Derek and Allison's. Mrs. Thorne, good to see you, Linda said, shaking my hand warmly. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. This is Martin Reeves, your counsel today. But we exchanged polite nods and settled around the polished table, the formality of the setting underscoring the stakes. This wasn't just a family discussion, it was a reckoning, transforming years of unspoken dynamics into binding agreements. Before we start, Linda said, her voice calm but firm, let's set the tone. Our goal is an amicable resolution that honors past contributions and creates fair terms for the future. This isn't about adversaries, it's about clarity and equity. Martin nodded. My clients share that goal. They're committed to addressing Mrs. Thorne's concerns and building a fairer arrangement. Linda opened a folder. Let's begin with the financials, which are the most clear-cut. Mrs. Thorne contributed $75,000 toward the Thompsons' home down payment, understood as a loan to be repaid. We have documentation, including emails, confirming this. Martin glanced at Derek and Allison. My clients acknowledge the loan and are prepared to repay it with 3% annual interest, proposing 500 monthly payments until satisfied. I raised an eyebrow at the modest figure, but Linda spoke before I could. Given the 12-year delay in the Thompsons' financial standing, we'd expect a more robust repayment, perhaps $3,000 monthly, with an initial down payment to reflect the time elapsed. Derek leaned forward. We can manage $2,500 monthly with a $10,000 payment next week. Linda looked to me and I nodded. She jotted it down. Next, Linda continued, compensation for services. Mrs. Thorne provided full-time childcare, household management, and support for 12 years, the market value of which is significant. Martin cleared his throat. My clients recognize Mrs. Thorne's contributions, but note she received room and board, which offsets some value. Indignation flared in me, but Linda was already responding. Room and board don't equate to the role of a live-in nanny, housekeeper, and cook. Even accounting for that, the fair market value of Mrs. Thorne's services exceeds $300,000. We're proposing $200,000, payable in installments, in light of the family relationship. Derek and Allison shared a fleeting glance, their eyes betraying a mix of caution and resolve. That's a considerable sum, Derek said, his voice measured, as if testing the weight of his words before letting them settle. Linda, ever quick to respond, leaned forward with a calm but firm counter. It's actually quite fair when you think about it. If you'd gone the professional route for these services, you'd be looking at a much steeper bill. Her tone carried the confidence of someone who'd done her homework, her gaze steady as she met their hesitation head-on. The agreement they reached felt like a fragile bridge, one that could hold the weight of their fractured family dynamic if crossed with care. For me, Willa, it meant more than just logistics. It was a lifeline to reclaiming a piece of myself. The decision to give Liv her own key to my new place was a small but significant gesture, one that made her eyes light up with a mix of pride and excitement. It wasn't just about access. It was about trust, about her feeling like she belonged in my world as much as I did in hers. As I sorted through my belongings in the Thompson household, each item I touched felt like a thread in the tapestry of our shared lives. The kitchen gadgets I'd bought to whip up Liv's favorite pancakes, dog-eared books we'd read together on rainy afternoons, photo albums brimming with memories of family vacations. These were more than objects. They were markers of time, of love, of a life so deeply entwined with theirs that untangling it felt like pulling at my own heartstrings. Every choice, keep, leave, store, was a quiet reckoning with what I was leaving behind and what I'd carry forward. One quiet afternoon, as I sifted through a box of teaching materials, phonics cards and storybooks I'd used to guide Liv through her early reading days, she perched on the edge of my bed, her small frame radiating a mix of curiosity and unease. Her eyes, wishty and searching, followed my hands as I worked. "Grandma, are you sure you want to leave?" she asked, her voice tinged with a hope that I might change my mind. Dad said they could make the garage really nice for you. I set the cards down and joined her, the mattress dipping slightly under our weight. My heart ached at her concern, but I kept my tone gentle, reassuring. "The garage apartment would be lovely, sweetheart, but I think it's time for me to have my own space again. Just like you'll want your own space someday when you're all grown up." She tilted her head, processing this, her brow furrowing as she wrestled with the idea of change. "But you'll still see me, right? Like a lot?" Her voice was small but insistent, and I could feel the weight of her need for reassurance. "Absolutely," I said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. We've got it all planned out. Sunday dinners, Wednesday afternoons, and I'll be cheering you on at every performance and game. Plus, you can call me anytime. I paused, then added, "And you'll have your own key to my apartment for our special days together." Her face lit up, a spark of joy breaking through her worry. "My own key? Really?" she asked, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Really," I confirmed, smiling at the way her chest puffed out with pride. "You're old enough to handle that responsibility." "I won't lose it, Grandma, I promise," she declared, her words carrying the solemnity of a vow. As my moving day drew closer, I found myself caught in a swirl of reflection. The sting of being offered the garage, a space that felt more like an afterthought than a home, had initially cut deep, wounding my pride and stirring a quiet anger. But that hurt had morphed into something unexpected, a catalyst for reclaiming my independence. The legal mediation, though painful and raw, had forced us to lay bare our grievances and expectations, clearing the air in a way that felt both exhausting and liberating. What I'd once seen as rejection had become a doorway to a new chapter, one I hadn't realized I was ready to write. The night before the move, Derek knocked softly on my bedroom door. "Got a minute, Willa?" he asked, his voice hesitant but warm. I waved him in, curious about this rare moment of vulnerability from a man who often hid behind practicality. He held out a plain envelope, his expression a mix of nervousness and sincerity. "This isn't part of our agreement," he said. "It's something else." I opened it to find a certificate for a series of art classes at the community college near my new apartment. My breath caught, and I looked at him, puzzled. "You mentioned years ago that you'd always wanted to learn to paint," he explained, rubbing the back of his neck as if embarrassed by his own thoughtfulness. "But you never had the time because you were always taking care of everyone else." The gesture hit me like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. Derek, who I'd often thought was oblivious to my inner world, had held on to this small dream I'd shared in passing. My throat tightened, and I managed a quiet, "Thank you, Derek. This is incredibly thoughtful." He shrugged, his cheeks tinged with a faint flush. "It's the least I could do, and I hope you know that despite everything, I value what you've given this family. Not just the help with chores or errands, but the love, the stability you've brought to Liv's life." His words, so long in coming, warmed a part of me that had grown cold in the months of tension. "I appreciate that," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling within. "And I hope you know that, despite our challenges, I've always valued you as Liv's father and Allison's husband." For a moment, we sat in silence, not the strained, heavy kind that had defined so many of our recent interactions, but one that felt almost peaceful, like a truce finally taking root. Moving day arrived with a crisp, clear dawn, the kind that promises new beginnings. Derek and Allison had insisted on hiring professional movers, covering the pod as a gesture of goodwill that felt like a small olive branch. As the last of my boxes were loaded onto the truck, I stood in the bedroom that had been mine for 12 years, now stripped bare of the personal touches that had made it home. The walls seemed to echo with memories of late-night talks with Liv, of quiet moments sipping tea while the house slept. Allison appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of resolve and something softer, almost wistful. "Ready, Mom?" she asked. I nodded, taking one final look around. "It feels strange leaving like this," I admitted, my voice catching slightly. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I know, but it's not really goodbye. It's just a change, a necessary one." I nodded again, her words resonating with the truth we both felt but hadn't fully articulated. Downstairs, Liv waited, clutching a small, carefully wrapped package. "Grandma, I made you something for your new place," she said, her eyes bright with anticipation. I unwrapped it to reveal a hand-painted ceramic dish, clearly the product of a recent art project. "For your keys and stuff," she explained, her voice brimming with pride. "So you don't lose them." My heart swelled at the thoughtfulness of her gift. So perfectly Liv. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'll use it every single day." The drive to my new apartment was short but felt monumental, a quiet journey from one chapter of my life to the next. As we unpacked the essentials and arranged furniture, I began to see the potential in this small, sunlit space. It was mine in a way the Thompson house never had been, a canvas for my preferences, my routines, my rhythms. Here, I could hang pictures where I wanted, arrange books without considering anyone else's needs. After the movers left and the major pieces were in place, Allison, Derek, and Liv prepared to go. "We'll let you settle in," Allison said, her voice warm but tinged with the weight of the moment. "But we'll see you Sunday for dinner, right?" "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, smiling. Liv lingered, her reluctance to leave palpable. "Can I stay and help Grandma unpack?" she asked, her eyes pleading. Derek knelt beside her, his tone gentle but firm. Not today, honey. Grandma needs time to make this place her own. But you'll see her Wednesday after school, remember? After a round of hugs and promises to call if I needed anything, they left, and I was alone. The silence in my new apartment was profound, almost sacred. No hum of a dishwasher, no murmur of a television, no footsteps echoing overhead, just the faint chirping of birds outside my window. I made a cup of tea and sank into my new armchair, surveying the space that was now mine. The apartment was small but thoughtfully designed, with large windows that bathed the rooms in natural light. The living room flowed into a compact dining area and an efficient kitchen, while the bedroom felt cozy rather than confining, with space for a comfortable bed and a reading chair. It was, I realized, the first space that had truly been mine since Robert's death 15 years ago. The thought of my late husband brought a sudden rush of tears. What would he make of this journey, the hurt of the garage proposal, the legal confrontation, this new beginning? Robert had always urged me to stand up for myself, even when my instinct was to smooth things over, to keep the peace at all costs. You'd be proud, Robert, I whispered into the quiet room. It took me long enough, but I finally did it. Over the next few days, as I unpacked boxes and hung pictures, I felt my identity stretching beyond the roles of grandmother and mother-in-law. I was Willa Thorne again, Willa, with dreams and routines that were mine alone. I enrolled in the art classes Derek had gifted me, discovering a surprising knack for watercolor landscapes that brought me a quiet joy I hadn't expected. I joined the community garden at my complex, claiming a small plot where I envisioned growing herbs and vibrant flowers. I reconnected with old teaching colleagues, meeting for coffee and reminiscing about our years in the classroom, laughter filling the gaps where time had stretched us apart. When Wednesday arrived, Liv burst through the door after school, her energy filling the apartment like sunlight. She explored every corner, eager to help arrange the last of my unpacked items. "This is so cool, Grandma," she declared, spinning in the middle of the living room. "It's like a mini house just for you." "That's exactly what it is," I agreed, setting out a plate of apple slices with peanut butter, her favorite since she was a toddler. "And I can come here whenever I want?" she asked, her voice hopeful. "On our scheduled days, yes, and other times if your parents agree and I'm free," I replied, watching her settle onto the sofa, munching contentedly. "I like having two homes now," she said simply. "Yours and Mom and Dad's." Her words landed softly, a reminder that despite the upheaval, I remained a constant in her world, a source of love and stability. As our routine of Wednesday visits and Sunday dinners took shape, my relationship with Allison and Derek began to shift. The formal agreements from mediation provided a structure, but within that framework, something new emerged. They started treating me as an independent woman with a life of her own, not just an extension of their household. I, in turn, found myself less entangled in their daily decisions, focusing instead on my direct bond with Liv. One Sunday evening, about 2 months after the move, Allison walked me to my car after dinner. "Mom, I've been meaning to say something," she began, her voice hesitant. "The garage situation, it was mostly Derek's idea, but I went along with it. I should have stood up for you." Her admission hung in the air, raw and honest. I looked at her, seeing not just my daughter-in-law, but a woman grappling with her own regrets. "It's okay, Allison," I said softly. "We've all made mistakes. What matters is where we go from here." She nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope that our relationship could grow into something new, something built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Allison's voice trembled as she spoke, her words heavy with a truth she'd been wrestling with for far too long. "I got so wrapped up in what was easy for us, what fit our schedule, that I stopped seeing what was fair or right." Her confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded, a moment of vulnerability that seemed to cost her every ounce of courage. Her eyes, usually so steady, flickered with the weight of regret, searching mine for some kind of response, some sign that her admission hadn't fallen into a void. I felt a swell of gratitude for her honesty, mingled with the ache of knowing how hard it was for her to say this aloud. "Allison, thank you for saying that," I said softly, my voice steady but warm. "It means more than you know to hear you acknowledge it." I paused, letting the moment settle between us, a fragile bridge built on truth. I've been thinking a lot about the example I'm setting for Liv, how I treat you, how I value the people in our lives, especially the older women who've cared for us. What does it teach her about respect, about honoring those who give so much? Allison shook her head, her expression clouded with self-reproach. That's not the lesson I want her to carry forward, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were laced with a quiet resolve, as if she were making a promise to herself as much as to me. I could see the conflict in her, guilt for the past, determination to do better, and the ever-present pressure of balancing her roles as mother, wife, and professional. It was a struggle I knew that intimately, one that had shaped my own life in ways I was only now beginning to fully understand. It's never too late to teach a better lesson, I said gently, offering her a small smile that I hoped conveyed both forgiveness and encouragement. Her eyes glistened as she nodded, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. I'm trying, she murmured. And in those two words, I heard the depth of her effort, the quiet battle she was waging to realign her priorities with her values. As I drove home that evening, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red, my mind wandered back to a moment that still felt like a jagged scar. Standing in the cold, dimly lit garage, clutching my suitcase, stunned by the sudden realization that I'd been pushed to the edges of the family I'd spent decades nurturing. The shock of that day, the way it had stripped me bare, exposing the fragility of my place in their lives, had been a wound I hadn't known how to heal at the time. But now, as I navigated the familiar streets to my apartment, I saw that moment for what it had become. Not an end, but a beginning. That painful reckoning had forced us all to confront truths we'd long avoided, to name the unspoken expectations that had governed our relationships, and to recognize the often invisible labor of care that held our family together. It had been agonizing, yes, but it had also been transformative, reshaping us into something more honest, more equitable, more deeply connected than we had ever been before. When I reached my apartment, I set my keys down in the ceramic dish Liv had made for me, its uneven edges and bright, childlike colors a quiet reminder of the love that still bound us. The ritual of placing my keys there had become a small act of grounding, a way to mark the transition from the outside world to the space I'd claimed as my own. Through the window, I could see the community garden, where my herbs were just beginning to push through the soil, their delicate green tips a promise of growth. In the corner of the room, my latest watercolor, a soft, shimmering depiction of the lake where Robert and I had spent our summers, stood on the easel, a testament to the creativity I'd rediscovered in these quiet months. This apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was a sanctuary I'd built, shaped by my own hands and desires, free from the compromises that had once defined my life. The fear I'd felt at the prospect of living alone had long since faded, replaced by a deep appreciation for the rhythm of my days. The solitude I'd once dreaded now felt like a gift, a space where I could listen to my own thoughts, pursue my own interests, and arrange my life according to my own needs. That night, as I prepared for bed in the calm of my apartment, I marveled at the strange alchemy that had turned humiliation into empowerment, rejection into self-discovery. By standing up for my worth, financially, emotionally, practically, I'd reclaimed not just security but something far more precious, a sense of self that existed beyond the roles of mother and grandmother. The garage, meant to diminish me, had instead become the catalyst for my liberation. That one phone call to my attorney had set in motion a journey I could never have predicted, pulling me from the shadows of others' lives into the clear, radiant light of my own. As I drifted towards sleep, a quiet gratitude settled over me. The pain of that awakening had been worth it, leading me to a life richer and more authentic than I'd ever imagined. Sometimes I thought we must lose what we thought we wanted to find what we truly need. Sometimes we must stand at the edge of rejection to summon the courage to claim our own worth. And sometimes a cold, unforgiving garage can become the unlikely doorway to a life of freedom and possibility. 6 months into this new chapter, spring arrived with a burst of color and life. The community garden outside my apartment transformed from barren soil to a vibrant patchwork of green, and my own small plot thrived with herbs and flowers, their scents mingling in the warm air. My watercolor skills had grown. My once awkward strokes now forming landscapes that captured the quiet beauty of the world around me. Several of my paintings now hung on my apartment walls, each one a marker of my progress, a reminder that I was still capable of learning, of creating. My days had found a new rhythm: art classes on Mondays, garden committee meetings on Thursdays, visits with Liv on Wednesdays and Sundays, a structure that gave me both purpose and joy, something I hadn't felt so fully in decades. The financial arrangement with Allison and Derek had unfolded smoothly, their monthly payments arriving like clockwork, steadily building my savings and sense of security. The mediation agreement we'd reached had held strong, both sides honoring not just its terms but its spirit, a commitment to fairness and respect that had reshaped our interactions. What had once been tense and awkward had evolved into something new, a relationship grounded in honesty, balance, and a kind of affection that felt more genuine than ever before. One Wednesday afternoon in April, Liv burst through my door, her face alight with excitement. "Grandma, guess what?" she shouted, barely pausing to catch her breath. "I got the lead in the spring musical." I looked up from the book I'd been reading, my heart swelling with pride. "That's incredible, sweetheart. Tell me everything." She dropped her backpack and flung herself onto the sofa beside me, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's called The Garden of Dreams, and I'm the dreamer, the main character who has to save the garden from the Frost King. There's singing and dancing and so much to do." Her eyes sparkled as she described the role, but beneath her enthusiasm I caught a flicker of worry. "The performances are 2 weeks from Friday and Saturday," she added, her voice softening. "Miss Kennedy says we need to practice a lot. Mom and Dad say they'll come, but they might be late because of some work thing." The disappointment in her tone was subtle but unmistakable, and it tugged at my heart. I knew how much it meant to her to have her parents there, scanning the audience for their familiar faces. "I'll be there for both performances, front and center," I promised, leaning forward to meet her gaze. "And I'll help you practice your lines and songs whenever you want." Her smile returned, bright and relieved. "Really? That would be so great. There's a lot to memorize." That evening, when Allison came to pick up Liv, I mentioned the musical. "She's so thrilled about her role," I said, keeping my tone light. "Will you and Derek really have trouble making it to the performances?" Allison sighed, glancing toward Liv, who was gathering her things in the next room, and lowered her voice. "Derek has this client dinner that's been scheduled forever. I told him we should reschedule, but he says it's critical for landing a big account. I might make it for the second half, but..." She trailed off, her face etched with guilt. I recognized that look, the impossible juggling act of being a working mother, the constant pull between career and family. I'd lived it myself, and I felt a pang of empathy for her. "What if I record it?" I offered. "That way, even if you miss parts, you can watch the whole thing together later." Allison's expression brightened, relief washing over her. "That would be perfect. Thank you, Mom." As they left, I reflected on how far we'd come. 6 months ago, a conversation like this would have been laced with tension. My suggestion misconstrued as judgment, her absence seen as proof of misplaced priorities. Now we could navigate these moments with grace, acknowledging each other's realities without blame. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of rehearsals and practice sessions. Liv would come to my apartment after school, and we'd dive into her lines, songs, and choreography. I'd hold up cue cards, play the piano accompaniment on the small keyboard I'd bought just for this, and cheer her on when she faltered. Watching her grow into the role, her confidence blooming, her voice finding its strength, filled me with a pride so deep it ached. Those afternoons, filled with laughter and music, became some of the most precious moments of my new life. 3 days before the performance, as Liv practiced her final monologue, my phone rang. It was Barbara, my sister, her voice brimming with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Willa, are you sitting down?" My heart skipped a beat. Those words rarely heralded good news. "What's happened?" I asked, bracing myself. "It's not bad, don't panic," she said quickly. "But I did something a bit impulsive, and I'm hoping you'll be okay with that." Knowing Barbara's version of impulsive could range from adopting a stray dog to buying a boat, I pressed her. "Go on." I sold the flower shop, she announced. The words hit me like a shockwave. Barbara had poured her heart into that business for nearly 2 decades, building it from a tiny storefront into a beloved local institution. What? Why? I asked, my mind racing. A bigger company made an offer I couldn't turn down, she explained. They want to keep the shop as it is, but expand the greenhouse side. I'll stay on as a consultant for the transition, but after that, she paused, her voice bubbling with anticipation. I'm free. Free to do what, exactly? I asked, intrigued but wary. This is the part I hope you'll like, she said, her excitement practically spilling through the phone. I bought an RV, a nice, compact one, perfect for 1 or 2 people, and I'm planning a cross-country trip starting next month. The question is, will you come with me? The invitation landed like a gust of wind, stirring up thoughts I hadn't dared to entertain. Barbara, I can't just leave, I said, the words automatic, a reflex born of habit. Why not? She countered, her tone gentle but challenging. You're not tied to that family anymore. You have your own place, your own money. Liv's getting more independent every day. What's stopping you from having an adventure? Her question echoed in my mind long after we hung up, unsettling in its simplicity. I'd built a life I loved here, a routine that brought me comfort and joy. But was it enough? Was I settling into a new kind of complacency, trading one set of constraints for another? The idea of a cross-country trip with Barbara, open roads, new horizons, the freedom to go wherever the wind took us, was both thrilling and terrifying. As I sat in my quiet apartment, the hum of possibility began to take root, whispering of adventures yet to come. The conversation with Barbara lingered in my mind like a melody I couldn't shake. Her invitation to join her on an RV trip across the country stirred a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement tinged with fear, curiosity shadowed by doubt. At 65, was I too old to embark on such a journey? Or was this precisely the moment to grasp an opportunity that might never come again? I sat in my quiet apartment, staring at the familiar cracks in the wall, wrestling with the weight of her words. Was my life so deeply entwined with my daughter Allison and granddaughter Liv, holding me back from something bigger? Or was it my own hesitation, cloaked in the guise of responsibility, that kept me tethered? The next morning, over coffee with my neighbor Eleanor, I spilled the details of Barbara's proposal. Eleanor, with her sharp wit and weathered wisdom, didn't hesitate. You have to go, she said, her eyes gleaming with the kind of conviction that comes from living through loss. She told me about her own solo cruise to Alaska after her husband Howard's death, how her children had fretted, warning her of dangers as if staying home in her armchair was any safer. Life happens wherever you are, she said, her voice warm but firm. And a grandmother who comes back with stories of adventure? That's a legacy for Liv. Her words struck a chord, planting a seed of possibility. I thought of Liv, my vibrant granddaughter, in the carefully orchestrated schedule we'd built, visitation days, school pickups, moments that felt vital. Could I step away without unraveling the fabric of our bond? Or was my fear less about Liv's needs and more about my own reluctance to leap into the unknown? That evening, I watched Liv at her dress rehearsal for the school musical. She was a vision, confident, radiant, wholly immersed in her role. As she moved across the stage, I felt a swell of pride so intense it bordered on ache, but beneath it ran a quieter, more bittersweet current. Liv was growing into her own person, her light no longer dependent on my constant presence. I wondered if my role in her life was shifting, if loving her well meant showing her how to embrace life at every age, even mine. As we walked to the parking lot afterward, Liv bubbled with excitement, recounting every mishap. Tyler's fumbled line, Emma's crown tumbling off. Ms. Kennedy says that's just live theater, she said, her eyes bright. You keep going no matter what. I marveled at her resilience, telling her how poised she'd been, how she'd shone even when things went awry. Then out of nowhere, she asked, Grandma, were you ever in a play when you were my age? Her question caught me off guard, pulling me back to a long-buried memory. Once, I said, smiling at the recollection, I was a tree in my 4th-grade play. Not exactly a star. Liv giggled, but her next question hit deeper. Did your mom come to see you? I faltered, the truth rising like a tide. My mother, practical to a fault, had been consumed with work and caring for my ailing father. She hadn't made it to the performance, and I'd buried the sting of her absence long ago. No, I told Liv gently. She was taking care of my dad, who was sick. Liv nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's sad, but I bet she would have come if she could, right? I agreed, though the reality was murkier. My mother's love had been real but distant, shaped by a generation that prioritized duty over presence. I'd spent my life trying to be different for Allison, and now for Liv, pouring myself into their moments, big and small. But as we reached Allison's car, I couldn't help but wonder, what example was I setting for Liv in my later years? Was I showing her how to live boldly, or was I clinging to the safety of routine? Allison noticed my pensiveness as Liv clambered into the back seat. You look deep in thought, Mom, she said, her tone curious but gentle. I brushed it off, mentioning vaguely that I was reflecting on generations. But I asked to meet for coffee the next day. I needed to talk, to lay bare the decision weighing on me. We met at our usual cafe, a cozy spot halfway between our homes, where the hum of conversation and the clink of cups felt like neutral ground. Over steaming mugs, I took a deep breath and shared Barbara's invitation. An RV trip across the country, open-ended, stretching from national parks to far-flung friends, maybe even Alaska if the weather allowed. Allison's eyes widened, her spoon pausing mid-stir. For how long? She asked, her voice laced with surprise but not judgment. That's the thing, I admitted. It could be months. The logistics, my apartment, my art classes, the garden plot, those can be sorted. But the real question is about you and Liv. Our routines, our time together. Would my being gone disrupt that? Allison studied me, her gaze steady and searching. Mom, are you asking my permission? The question startled me, cutting through my carefully layered concerns. Not exactly, I said, fumbling for words. I'm just thinking about how my choices affect you both. She leaned back, her expression softening, as she recalled a painful memory when she and her husband Derek had moved me to the garage to make space for their growing family. It had been a misstep, born of necessity, but heavy with unspoken resentment. That didn't work out well for anyone, she said quietly, and I nodded, acknowledging the truth. This is different, I insisted. Liv's at such a formative age. Our relationship matters to her. Allison reached for my hand, her touch grounding. It does, she agreed, but so does seeing her grandmother live fully, chasing her own dreams. Her words caught me off guard, their generosity unraveling my doubts. She suggested we could manage. Liv could FaceTime me from different stops on my journey, turning it into a virtual adventure. Maybe they'd even fly out to join me somewhere, a mini vacation woven into my travels. Her support felt like a gift, a bridge between the sacrifices of our past and the possibilities of our future. 6 months ago, this conversation would have been unthinkable. Me contemplating an extended absence, Allison encouraging it. We'd grown, both of us, beyond the old patterns of obligation and guilt. Just promise me you'll wait until after Liv's musical to decide, Allison added, her smile warm. She's so excited for you to be there. I promise without hesitation. I wouldn't miss it for anything. The night of Liv's opening performance buzzed with anticipation. I arrived early, claiming a front row seat, my camera ready to capture every moment. The elementary school auditorium filled with proud parents and grandparents, their arms full of flowers and their faces alight with expectation. To my surprise, Derek slipped into the seat beside me just as the lights dimmed. Barely made it, he whispered, admitting he'd rescheduled a client dinner. Some things are more important. His words, so unlike the work-driven man I'd known for years, touched me deeply. Before I could respond, the curtain rose, and Liv took the stage, her presence electric. For the next hour, I was captivated, not just by the charming chaos of the production, but by Liv's confidence, her clear voice ringing out, her movements graceful beyond her 10 years. When she delivered her final monologue about the power of dreams to shape reality, tears pricked my eyes. Beside me, Derek wiped his own, his emotion quiet but unmistakable. As the audience erupted in applause, Liv took her bow, her smile radiant with pride. Derek leaned over, his voice thick. She's incredible. Thank you for helping her prepare. I brushed off the credit, insisting Liv had done the hard work, but his gratitude lingered. In the lobby afterward, Liv ran to us, still in her costume, her face flushed with joy. "Did you see? Did you watch everything?" she asked, her words tumbling over each other. I handed her the bouquet I'd brought, telling her she'd been magnificent, and Derek knelt to her level, echoing my praise. "Superstar performance, Liv," he said, his pride as palpable as mine. In that moment, surrounded by the chatter of families and the glow of Liv's triumph, I felt the weight of my decision begin to lift. Barbara's invitation no longer felt like a departure from my life, but an extension of it. A chance to show Liv and myself that adventure knows no age, that dreams can transform reality at any stage. The moment she caught sight of him, her eyes widened with a mix of shock and quiet joy, as if she couldn't quite believe he was standing there. "You're here," she said, her voice trembling with surprise. "But what about that big dinner you had planned?" He smiled, his expression soft yet resolute, and replied, "No dinner, no matter how important, could ever mean more than watching my daughter light up the stage." His words carried a weight of sincerity that wrapped around her heart like a warm embrace. As they walked to the car side by side, a family reshaped yet whole, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The past 6 months had woven a tapestry of change through our lives, each thread subtle yet transformative, binding us closer in ways we hadn't anticipated. Derek, once consumed by the relentless pursuit of his career, had shifted in ways that felt almost miraculous. Family gatherings, once relegated to the margins of his ambition, now held a sacred place in his heart. I could see it in the way he looked at Liv, his eyes brimming with pride and presence, no longer distracted by the next rung on the corporate ladder. Allison, too, had undergone her own quiet revolution. She had come to see the unseen labor of care, those endless, often thankless tasks of nurturing a family, as a profound act of love, not just a duty. Her hands, once restless with the need to prove herself, now moved with a gentleness that spoke of newfound respect for the work that binds a family together. And Liv, sweet, vibrant Liv, was blooming like a wildflower under the warmth of being truly seen. The knowledge that the adults in her life valued her, not just as a child, but as a person with dreams and fears, had given her a confidence that radiated from her every smile. As for me, I had rediscovered parts of myself long buried under the weight of being the helpful grandmother. For years, I had poured myself into that role, my identity shrinking to fit the needs of others. But now I was more than that. I was a woman with dreams, with a hunger for adventure, with a voice that demanded to be heard. The transformation wasn't just personal, it was a reclamation of my place in the world. That Sunday, as we gathered for our weekly dinner, the air was thick with warmth and anticipation. I took a deep breath and shared my decision, one I'd been turning over in my heart for weeks. "I'm joining Barbara on her RV adventure," I announced, my voice steady but laced with excitement. I unfolded the map Barbara had sketched, pointing to the route we'd planned. "We'll start in early June, heading first to the southwest, the Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, then winding our way through the Rockies to Yellowstone." Liv's eyes sparkled with wonder as she traced the path with her finger, her imagination already dancing across the canyons and peaks. "You're really going to see all those places?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and envy. "That's the plan," I said, grinning. "I'll send you postcards from every stop, and we can video chat so you can see the views for yourself." Her face lit up and she leaned forward, barely containing her enthusiasm. "Can I come visit you somewhere? Like maybe at one of those super cool places?" Her eagerness tugged at my heart, and I glanced at Allison and Derek, leaving the decision to them. "That's up to your parents," I said, "but I'd love nothing more." Derek's thoughtful nod was a quiet promise. "We could make something work during summer break," he said, his tone warm and accommodating. "Maybe Yellowstone or Glacier." His words struck me, not because of the logistics, but because of what they represented. He wasn't just agreeing to a visit. He was weaving my adventure into the fabric of our family's plans, treating it as a gift rather than a burden. It was a far cry from the days when my needs were an afterthought, tucked away to accommodate everyone else's convenience. Dinner unfolded with a harmony I hadn't dared hope for 6 months ago, when the sting of the garage incident still lingered like a bruise. We talked logistics, how to manage my apartment while I was gone, how to stay connected across miles, how to adjust our visitation schedule when I returned. The conversation wasn't just practical, it was infused with a mutual respect that felt new and precious, a stark contrast to the tension that once defined us. After dinner, as Liv bustled about clearing plates, Allison pulled me aside, her expression soft but serious. "Mom," she said, her voice catching slightly, "I've been wanting to tell you something. Watching you these past 6 months, seeing how you've carved out a life that's truly yours, it's been inspiring. Not just for Liv, but for me." Her words landed like a gift I hadn't expected, stirring a warmth deep in my chest. "How so?" I asked, genuinely curious. She smiled, a little wistful. "You've shown me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to chase your own joy, and that loving someone doesn't mean you have to lose yourself in the process." Her admission, raw and honest, was a bridge between us, built on lessons we'd both learned the hard way. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation, each task a step toward the unknown. Barbara rolled into town with her compact RV, a 20-foot haven she'd christened Liberty, and we dove into the details of our journey. We pored over maps, stocked up on supplies, and made arrangements for my apartment. I sublet it to Eleanor's niece, who needed a temporary home while her own was under renovation. A perfect solution that ensured my space wouldn't sit empty and my plants would be cared for. The garden committee, ever gracious, reassigned my plot to a family on the waiting list, with the promise that I could reclaim one when I returned. My art instructor, sensing the creative potential of the trip, suggested I bring sketching supplies to capture the journey in watercolors, perhaps creating a travel journal to immortalize the experience. Through it all, Liv was my biggest cheerleader, diving into research about our route and crafting a special journal for me to record stories for her. "Take lots of pictures of animals," she instructed, her tone serious, "especially bears and wolves, but not too close because they're dangerous." I chuckled, touched by her concern. "Safety first," I promised. "No wildlife selfies." The night before we left, Allison and Derek hosted a small send-off party, complete with a cake decorated like an RV, its icing wheels ready to roll into the unknown. They gifted me a high-quality digital camera, a tool to capture every moment of the adventure. As the evening drew to a close, Liv approached me with a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a bracelet she'd made in art class, each bead chosen with intention. "Blue for the sky you'll see," she explained, her voice earnest. "Green for the forests, red for the Grand Canyon rocks." I slipped it onto my wrist, my throat tight with emotion. "I'll wear it every day," I told her, "and every time I look at it, I'll think of you." Later, Derek handed me an envelope, his expression warm but slightly shy. "A little something for the road," he said. Inside was a generous gift card for gas and supplies, along with a handwritten note. "Thank you for teaching us what family really means. Safe travels, and come back soon. With love, Derek and Allison." The words, free of the defensiveness that once colored our interactions, were a testament to how far we'd come. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house that had been my home for 12 years, a place that held both my deepest sense of belonging and my sharpest moments of rejection. The garage, once a symbol of my marginalization, was just a structure now, emptied of its emotional weight. It was no longer a reminder of being pushed to the edges of my own life, but a marker of the lessons we had all learned about value, dignity, and respect. Barbara, sensing the quiet shift in my mood, reached over and squeezed my hand. "Penny for your thoughts, sis?" she asked. I smiled, my heart full. "Just thinking about journeys," I said. "How the ones that start with the most pain can lead to the deepest transformation." She nodded, her eyes on the road. "From a garage to the open highway," she said. "Not a path anyone could have predicted." "No," I agreed, "but maybe exactly the one I needed." The next morning, as we packed Liberty and checked our route one last time, I stood in the parking lot of my apartment complex, taking in the place that had been my first step toward independence. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. "Safe travels, Mom. We love you and we'll miss you. This isn't goodbye. Just see you later. Call when you can." The message, warm and unguarded, filled me with gratitude for the family we'd become. I climbed into Liberty's passenger seat, and Barbara turned to me with a grin. "Ready for the adventure of a lifetime, Willa?" Was I ready to explore landscapes I'd only dreamed of? To meet strangers with stories that would broaden my world? To uncover parts of myself I'd long forgotten? More than ready, I said, mirroring her smile. Let's go. As Liberty pulled away, I didn't look back. The past, its pain, its joy, its lessons, stayed where it belonged. Ahead lay open roads, endless skies, and the thrill of a future I could shape on my own terms. The garage, once meant to be my endpoint, had become my beginning, an unlikely gateway to a life richer than I'd ever imagined. The sun climbed higher, its light spilling into the cabin, catching Liv's bracelet and scattering tiny rainbows across the dashboard. The highway stretched toward the horizon, not an escape but a path forward, brimming with possibility. As the horizon stretched wide before us, the city's skyline fading into a distant memory, I felt a quiet liberation settle in my chest. The weight of that pivotal moment a year ago, the one where I chose courage over complacency, where I decided to value myself, had unraveled into countless moments of discovery. Each choice had built upon the last, like stones forming a path I hadn't known I was capable of walking. Now, with the open road unfurling through fields of amber and crimson, the lingering shadows of the garage incident, the moment that had once threatened to define me, dissolved entirely. In their place bloomed a vibrant anticipation, a certainty that at 65 I was stepping into the most meaningful chapter of my life. It had been a year since Barbara and I set out in Liberty, our trusty RV, embarking on a cross-country odyssey that began as a hesitant leap into the unknown. What started as a tentative escape from routine had transformed into a journey that reshaped us both in ways we couldn't have foreseen. We'd crisscrossed 26 states, from the sun-baked mesas of Arizona to the fog-kissed shores of Maine. We'd slept under canopies of stars in remote campgrounds, their brilliance so vivid it felt like the universe was whispering secrets. We'd parked in the driveways of strangers who became friends, their stories weaving into the tapestry of our adventure. We'd wandered through ancient forests, their towering trees humbling us with their quiet endurance, and waded into the icy waves of two oceans, laughing like children as the cold shocked our senses. Every mile had gifted us stories, each one a keepsake, more precious than any trinket. What was meant to be a few months of exploration stretched longer as we discovered a hunger for adventure neither of us knew we possessed. Barbara, with her steady hand on the wheel and her knack for finding beauty in the smallest moments, had been my anchor and my co-conspirator. Together we'd unearthed parts of ourselves we'd forgotten, or perhaps never known. At 65, I found myself marveling at my own capacity for reinvention, a spark I thought had dimmed long ago. Now, as autumn painted the landscape in fiery hues, we were finally heading back to Lakeside Heights, carrying with us not just memories but a profound shift in who we were. "Hard to believe we're almost home," Barbara said, her voice cutting through the hum of Liberty's engine as she guided us along the familiar interstate. Her eyes flicked to me, a playful glint in them. "Remember how you were convinced you'd be clawing to get back to your routine within a week?" I chuckled, the memory of my early doubts surfacing like an old photograph. I was terrified I'd be homesick, or worse, that I'd hate every second of this. I kept picturing myself curled up in Liberty, missing my cozy chair and my predictable life. "Instead," Barbara said, her grin widening, "you turned into the adventure queen. Who was the one begging to go whitewater rafting in Colorado?" I raised my hands in mock defense. That was a calculated risk. The guide swore it was beginner-friendly. "Beginner-friendly?" Barbara snorted. "That guide was a 20-year-old thrill-seeker who thought anyone over 60 needed to grab life by the horns. But I'll give you this, it was one of the best days we had." The memory flooded back, the icy spray of the Colorado River stinging my face, the wild rush of adrenaline as we navigated the churning rapids, the bone-deep exhaustion that followed, laced with a triumph I hadn't felt in years. I could still hear Barbara's whoops echoing off the canyon walls, her laughter mingling with mine, as we realized we'd conquered something we'd never dared imagine. Those moments, raw, exhilarating, alive, were ones I'd never have known if I'd stayed tethered to the safety of my old life. As Liberty crossed the state line, my thoughts drifted to the reunion awaiting us. I'd kept in close touch with Allison, Derek, and especially Liv throughout the journey. Video calls from breathtaking vistas had bridged the miles, my voice crackling through spotty connections as I narrated virtual tours of national monuments or read bedtime stories to Liv from thousands of miles away. They'd even joined us for a week in Yellowstone as we'd planned, where Liv's boundless enthusiasm had lit up the trip. She'd filled 3 disposable cameras with photos of elk and geysers, her eyes wide with wonder as she declared herself an explorer. But those digital connections, those fleeting visits, were no substitute for the rhythm of daily life together. How would we slip back into each other's orbits after so much time apart? Had the fragile balance we'd rebuilt after the garage incident shifted in ways I couldn't yet see? "You're awfully quiet," Barbara said, glancing over as she adjusted her grip on the wheel. "Nervous about going back?" "Not nervous exactly," I said, searching for the right words. "Just reflective. This year has changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I'm not the same woman who left Lakeside Heights." Barbara's smile was soft, her voice carrying the gentle wisdom that had steadied us through countless challenges on the road. "That's what journeys do. They reshape you. The real question is, what are you going to do with all you've found inside yourself?" It was the question that had been simmering in my mind for weeks. This journey had awakened parts of me I'd long buried. Resilience that surprised me, adaptability I hadn't known I possessed, a curiosity that felt like a child's, and a joy in the unexpected that made every day a gift. I'd rediscovered passions I'd set aside decades ago. The click of a camera capturing a desert sunset, the quiet awe of stargazing in a wilderness untouched by city lights, the satisfaction of penning short stories inspired by the people and places we'd encountered. I'd met women my age and older, vibrant, fearless women who were carving out lives rich with purpose, defying the narrow expectations of what it meant to be a grandmother. Most of all, I'd forged a deeper connection with myself, learning to listen to my own heart, to honor my boundaries, to cherish my own company in a way I hadn't since I was young. The woman returning to Lakeside Heights was both the person I'd always been and someone entirely new. Like a familiar song played in a bold, unexpected key, my phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from Allison. "Just a heads up, we've planned a small welcome home gathering. Hope that's okay. Nothing big, just family and a few neighbors who've missed you." I smiled at her thoughtfulness. The old Allison might have sprung a surprise party on me, assuming I'd love the fanfare. The new Allison, shaped by the changes we'd all undergone, understood I might need time to brace myself after months of relative solitude. "Looks like we're rolling right into a party," I said, showing Barbara the text. "Perfect," she replied, her eyes lighting up. "I'm starving for real food that doesn't come from Liberty's shoebox of a fridge." We pulled into Allison and Derek's driveway as the late afternoon sun bathed Lakeside Heights in a golden glow. Cars lined the street, and balloons tied to the mailbox danced in the autumn breeze, their colors bright against the fading light. Before we could even step out of the RV, the front door burst open, and Liv came barreling down the path. Her legs seemed longer, her face brighter, her energy a force of nature. "Grandma! Aunt Barb!" she shouted, her voice a melody of joy. "You're finally home!" She launched herself into my arms the moment my feet hit the driveway, nearly toppling me with her enthusiasm. At 11, Liv was teetering on the edge of childhood and adolescence, still eager for hugs but carrying a new awareness of her growing independence. I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it ached. "Let me look at you," I said, stepping back to take her in. "You've grown at least 2 inches. 3, she corrected, standing a little taller, her pride evident. "And I got my braces last month. See?" She flashed a grin, revealing a neat row of metal brackets that gleamed in the sunlight. "Very sophisticated," I said, nodding approvingly. "And how's middle school? Spill the details." "It's mostly awesome," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I joined the drama club and I'm on the environmental committee. Oh, and I'm learning clarinet." Her enthusiasm was a warm wave, washing away the fatigue of the road. This was what I'd missed most, the unfiltered connection to this extraordinary girl who carried pieces of me in her DNA, but was crafting a life so uniquely her own. Allison and Derek appeared behind her, their smiles warm but tempered with a quiet reserve. The year had left its mark on them too, silver threads woven into Derek's hair, a newfound confidence in Allison's posture. They hugged me tightly, their embraces carrying a sincerity that eased the faint apprehension I'd carried about our reunion. Inside, a small group of neighbors and friends waited, the house filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food. The gathering was thoughtful and understated. Platters of carefully prepared dishes, questions about our travels, gasps of awe as I scrolled through photos on my tablet. Eleanor from my apartment complex was there, along with other neighbors who'd become friends during the transformative months after the garage incident. Their genuine warmth confirmed that I'd built a community beyond my role as Liv's grandmother, a network of connections that felt like a gift. As the evening unfolded, I found myself swept into conversations, sharing stories of our adventures. Paragliding in Utah, stargazing in Montana, the time we got lost in a Nebraska cornfield and laughed until we cried. The reactions ranged from amazement to playful concern. Paragliding? At your age, one neighbor teased, her eyes wide with admiration. Through it all, I noticed the subtle shifts in the room's dynamics. Derek's deference to Allison on certain topics, Liv's ease as she flitted between adult conversations, the way everyone made a point to include Barbara, their questions drawing her into the fold. As the night wound down and guests began to drift away, Derek approached me with a glass of wine. "Got a minute for a private chat?" he asked, nodding toward the back patio. Curiosity piqued, I followed him outside, grabbing a sweater against the cool autumn air. We settled into patio chairs overlooking the garden, which was vibrant with fresh mulch and late-blooming chrysanthemums. "You've kept the garden looking beautiful," I said, remembering how it had once been my sanctuary. "Liv's taken it over," Derek said, his voice warm with pride. "She's got a real knack for it. Said she wanted to keep it nice for when you got back." He swirled his wine, his expression turning thoughtful. "Which brings me to what I wanted to talk about. Your living arrangements now that you're home." My guard went up, a reflex born of that long-ago conversation about the garage. Derek must have sensed it because he quickly added, "Not like before, the opposite actually." I relaxed slightly, my curiosity outweighing my caution. "I'm listening." "The thing is, Willa," he said, his tone earnest, "a lot's changed while you were gone. We've all had time to think about what happened, how we treated you, what we almost lost. We want to make sure you feel at home here, not just as Liv's grandma, but as you, with everything you've discovered about yourself." His words settled over me, a quiet acknowledgement of the past and a promise of something new. I looked out at the garden, at the life Liv had tended in my absence, and felt the weight of the journey behind me and the possibilities ahead. The woman I'd become, resilient, curious, whole, was ready to step into whatever came next, not just as a grandmother, but as someone who'd learned to embrace her own story. As Derek's gaze met mine, his eyes carried a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years, a raw honesty that stripped away the usual layers of familial roles and expectations. We sat in the soft glow of the evening, the air thick with the weight of a conversation long overdue. The garage apartment, once a makeshift afterthought, had been transformed into a proper home. No longer just a storage space with a cot, it now boasted real insulation, a functioning heater, reliable plumbing, and a kitchen where one could actually cook a meal. It was a space designed for living, private and warm, a far cry from the cold, cluttered corner I'd once been relegated to. I tilted my head, curiosity mingling with caution, unsure of where this was leading. Derek sensed my hesitation and leaned forward, his words tumbling out with a touch of awkwardness. "We're not saying you have to move in there, Willa, not unless it's what you want. What I'm trying to get at, probably not as smoothly as I'd like, is that we want you to know you have choices. Your old apartment is still there, free since Eleanor's niece moved out last month. Or there's the garage apartment if you'd rather be closer to us. Or heck, something entirely different, if that's what feels right." His words landed gently, each one a deliberate step away from the assumptions that had once defined our interactions. This wasn't the Derek who, years ago, had casually suggested I make do with a corner of the garage, as if my presence was an inconvenience to be tucked away. This was a man who had spent time reflecting, who understood that offering choices was a way of honoring my autonomy. I felt a flicker of warmth, a quiet gratitude for the shift. "Thank you, Derek," I said, my voice steady but softer than I'd expected. "That means a lot." He set his wine glass down, the faint clink punctuating the moment. "It's the least we could do, Willa, after everything." He paused, his expression softening further, as if weighing whether to share what came next. "Your journey this past year, it's changed us, especially Liv. She's been telling everyone who'll listen about her adventurer grandma. Did you know she started a blog about your travels? It's become a bit of a hit at her school." "A blog?" The word caught me off guard, a surprise that sent a ripple of emotion through me. Liv, my spirited 11-year-old granddaughter, had never mentioned this in our weekly calls, her voice always brimming with questions about the places I'd seen or the stories I'd collected. "She never said a word," I murmured, a smile tugging at my lips as I imagined her pouring her thoughts into words, her small hands typing out my adventures. "She wanted it to be a surprise," Derek said, his own smile warm with pride. "She's been writing about your journey from her perspective, what she's learned from you, how it's shifted the way she sees what's possible for women, especially as they grow older. It's pretty remarkable for a kid her age." The thought of Liv with her boundless curiosity and fierce heart, processing my year of wandering in such a profound way, stirred something deep within me. It wasn't just pride, it was awe. My travels, which had begun as a rebellion against being sidelined, had become a lens through which my granddaughter was reimagining her own future. I felt my throat tighten, a swell of love and wonder at how my choices had rippled outward, touching her in ways I hadn't foreseen. "I'd love to read it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "She'll show you tomorrow, I'm sure," Derek replied, his eyes crinkling with a smile. Then his tone grew serious again, grounding the moment. "Willa, the point is, we don't take you for granted anymore. Wherever you choose to live, now that you're back, whether it's the apartment, the garage, or somewhere new, we're behind you. We just want you in our lives, but on your terms, with the respect you deserve." The words hung between us, a stark contrast to the conversation that had sent me to the garage all those months ago. Back then, Derek's suggestion had felt like a dismissal, a casual relegation of my existence to a space better suited for forgotten furniture than a person. Now, here he was, acknowledging my worth with a sincerity that felt hard-won. It was a transformation as profound as the one I'd undergone on the road, where each mile had peeled back layers of who I thought I was, revealing a woman capable of far more than she'd ever been allowed to believe. "I appreciate that, Derek," I said, meeting his gaze. "Truly, I'll need some time to think it over. Barbara and I have a lot to sort through after this year." He nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. "Take all the time you need. And Willa, thank you for calling that attorney. It was a wake-up call we didn't know we needed. I didn't see it that way at the time, but I do now." As we rejoined the others inside, the warmth of the gathering wrapping around us, I found myself tracing the winding path that had brought me here. The humiliation of the garage, the sharp clarity of Linda Chen's intervention, the open road that had stretched before me like an invitation to rediscover myself. It was a journey none of us could have predicted. Yet it had reshaped us all. My absence had forced my family to see me not just as a grandmother or a fixture in their lives, but as a woman with her own desires, her own story. Later that night, as Barbara and I settled into our temporary rooms at a nearby hotel, the question that had been simmering between us finally surfaced. "So," she said, her voice soft but probing, "are you staying?" I paused, letting the weight of the question settle. The road had changed me, had reminded me of who I was beyond the roles I'd played for others. "In Lakeside Heights, yes," I said carefully. "But not like before. I want to hold on to the independence we've carved out this year. I'm thinking about finding a small house, something with a garden where I can put what I've learned about native plants to use. Maybe a spare room for when you visit." Barbara's eyes lit up, a nod of approval passing between us. "And your family?" she asked, her tone gentle but curious. "I'll keep our visitation schedule with Liv," I replied, "but on terms that honor the life I've built. I think we've all learned that love doesn't mean being at each other's beck and call. It's about respecting each other's space, our separate paths. The truth was the journey had awakened something in me, a realization that I was more than a grandmother, more than a retired teacher, more than a woman whose worth was tied to her usefulness. I was Willa Thorne, traveler, photographer, gardener, storyteller, wilderness enthusiast, a woman who had claimed adventure late in life and found it fit her perfectly. As Whitman might have said, I contained multitudes, and I was done letting any single role define me, no matter how dear it was. The garage incident, as painful as it had been a gift in disguise. It had jolted me out of complacency, pushing me toward a fuller, truer version of myself. Linda Chen's letter had been the spark, but the real change had come from within, from my decision to stand up for my worth, to demand more from life than the narrow expectations others had placed on me. As I lay in the quiet of the hotel room, the faint glow of lakeside heights twinkling beyond the window, I felt a deep gratitude for every step of the journey. The pain, the triumphs, the moments of doubt and discovery, they had all been necessary to bring me to this place of clarity. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, conversations about what came next. But tonight I rested in the certainty that whatever I chose would be mine, shaped by my desires and supported by a family that had grown as much in my absence as I had. That call to the attorney had changed everything, not because it forced Allison and Derek to reconsider, but because it had ignited in me the courage to value myself as fiercely as I'd always valued others. In standing up for my dignity in that cold, cluttered garage, I had opened the door to the richest chapter of my life. And as the lights of the town shimmered in the distance, I knew this chapter was only just beginning.